In this world, everything revolves around stones. Without them, human life would simply be impossible. Energy was obtained from tourmaline. But there was one special stone that had long fascinated humanity. It was purified in wars, and it chose people. Someone was holding a precious red stone, raising it to the sky and examining it carefully. In the constantly humming underground village, one man shouted something across the space. Someone sighed heavily, a real relief. The artist smiled. He was amused, because he had just enhanced the tourmaline's glow, and still had to adjust the mechanism. It was Dake Bosshi. He stopped here to stock up on food and silver. He thought he was helping the village. The locals immediately asked him to fix the sign. Even Zalizo was warned about it. "Get to work," he said. His grandmother came up to him and said that he didn't have to do that. But the guy just smiled. "Don't talk nonsense." He used magic. His hands immediately glowed. Touching the sign, he passed it the light. One of the residents held it above his head and exclaimed, "Like new!" The boys just shrugged their shoulders. Boring. They said they would rather just make the metal shiny. His mother angrily told him to be quiet. She handed him something, and the boys' mouths dropped open. It was a jewel. The mother had asked him not to let it go. She explained that gemstones hold magic that other ores don't. For example, redstone glows when heated. Dake raised his hand, and he said, "This is how he shows his depth and strength." Everyone around him gasped in delight, and one boy exclaimed, "That's cool!" No one knew yet that Dake Bosshi could transform. The children immediately asked to see the earrings. He touched the earring, but explained that he couldn't give it back. It was a symbol that he was an ore craftsman. Otherwise, there would be trouble. Meanwhile, somewhere deep in the caves, work was underway to extract gems. The young man handed a few stones to the man and whispered something, barely moving his lips. The man listed them, but he looked dissatisfied. However, he added that there was no point in showing off. He had hired the guy anyway, despite his leg, and considered it a sign of good character. One of the workers ran past and rushed to spread the rumor. A craftsman from the surface had come to the mine himself. He had an earring with a large ruby, which immediately interested the boy. The man the boy worked for said that such craftsmen rarely appear here. The young man began to mutter something about the earring, and the man asked what he meant. It was a simple village boy named Kai. Clutching the money in his palm, he thought about the craftsman's ruby earring. Meanwhile, Dake Bosshi had already collected a considerable amount of loot and decided that he needed to get some refreshment before starting the excavation. But just as he was thinking about this, someone approached him. It was Kai, who wanted to make sure that the man was indeed a craftsman. He also reported a landslide nearby and asked for help. Dake Bosshi immediately asked where the landslide had occurred, and the boy offered to show him the spot. When the master agreed, a shadow of a smile flickered across Kai's face. They moved deeper and deeper, and the conversation grew longer along the way. Dake Bosshi noticed this, but Kai assured them that there was very little left. The place was indeed spacious, but the master didn't like something about it. Suddenly, Kai crept up from behind and pushed him into the abyss ahead. Dake Bosshi flew down and shouted that jokes have limits. "This is too much!" Kai asked if it was really him who had come to their village 3 years ago. Dake Bosshi looked at him in surprise, not understanding what he was talking about. He replied that it was his first time here. When he realized that Kai was going to leave, he tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. Deep down, he couldn't forget that ruby with the crisscross lines. But Dake Bosshi exclaimed that it wasn't him, and Kai was mistaken. He asked for an exit. He said he had poor eyesight, was afraid of the dark, and suffered from claustrophobia. And as soon as that thought crossed his mind, he began to faint and collapsed. Dake Bosshi regained consciousness and slowly opened his eyes. Realizing what was happening, he knelt down and saw Kai in front of him. He didn't understand what kind of craftsman this was. Handed him the item and asked if he had really been carrying it all this time. It looked as if he had kept the thing at all costs. Although the craftsman himself did not remember this. Kai threw him an earring, saying he had to return it. Dake Bosshi was confused, not realizing when he had managed to pick it up. The boy's eyes burned with resentment. He realized he had made a mistake. And Dake Bosshi asked what exactly he was looking for. Kai replied that he was looking for him because of what had happened to his leg, and his family. This stunned Dake Bosshi. The boy took off his shoe, and the master saw that his foot was covered in stone. Kai said it was done by another craftsman. Dake Bosshi couldn't understand how that was even possible. It happened 3 years ago. Kai was buying food and returning to the village when a thick gas, like fog, appeared. People didn't understand what was happening. Some began to become covered in stone patches, as if their skin was freezing. His house was on the very edge of the village, where the fog was thickest. When Kai ran inside, he saw that his entire family had turned to stone. The stranger in the cloak was holding his father's head. He only managed to shout, "Run!" and then froze completely. Kai screamed, but the man with the earring had already grabbed him. He lifted the boy off the ground, and at that moment Kai's leg began to turn to stone. Screams for guards and police could be heard from somewhere. The man threw Kai aside and turned toward the noise. The boy begged to stop, but the stranger simply disappeared into the mist. After this story, Dake Bosshi understood everything. Kai hoped that it would remind him of something. After all, that man also had a ruby earring with 3 lines. The master explained that the 3 lines on the stone were probably a star-shaped structure. Such a stone is a garden spinel ruby. Kai couldn't even pronounce the name, he apologized, saying he didn't know much about gems. To him, it was just a shiny stone that everyone loved so much for some reason. He himself thought it was nonsense. But Dake Bosshi understood that. Kai needs to see everything with his own eyes. He showed him a box with various gems. Kai stared at the precious stones in surprise, and Dake Bosshi remembered how he got lost in a mine as a child. There, in the cramped conditions, he felt scared. But when he found the raw ruby, his heart beat so hard that the fear disappeared without a trace. He was overjoyed when he found such a perfect red stone among the pile of dirt. Then he showed me a few more. One was lapis lazuli, like the night sky. Another was aquamarine, like the depths of the ocean. And the tourmaline had such an amazing pattern that it seemed like the whole world was gathered inside. Its beauty was mesmerizing. But the most impressive thing was another stone. Dake Bosshi picked it up and abruptly raised it to Kai's face. He flinched in surprise. It was the only stone capable of awakening the true brilliance in man and his craftsmanship. That brilliance is a miracle created by nature, together with man. And Kai was not mistaken when he said that terrible wars were fought over these stones. But Dake Bosshi believed that this was not the fault of the stones, but only human sins. Gems can't be to blame, they just exist. Kai was about to say something, but at that moment, Dake Bosshi's stomach rumbled loudly. The boy's face broke into a smile. He could barely hold back his laughter. "That was the most interesting part. I'm waiting for the continuation," he said. They reached the shop, which smelled so delicious that the smell penetrated even through the door. Dake Bosshi sat down on a stone in surprise, waiting for his order. A long time passed. Finally the door opened and Kai ran out apologizing. He carried plates of food in both hands. It turned out that there was a commotion in the shop and they had to help out a bit. Dake Bosshi looked at the fried rice dish and exclaimed in surprise. It looked very appetizing. He praised Bosshi's work, and the chef remarked that the dish was truly impressive. Kai worked here part-time. It was part of his job. Dake Bosshi closed his eyes in satisfaction. The dish was surprisingly delicious, with a perfect balance of salt and meat. Kai just smiled and added, puffing his cheeks. Something was going on in his head. He had never been to the surface and asked if there were any rocks in Dake Bosshi the same color as the sky, the same one he had shown before, like the ocean. He really wanted to see it again. This made Dake Bosshi happy. His eyes shone and his face lit up with a smile. He said that the sky comes in different colors, even red, like a ruby. Kai wondered, can the sky be red? Dake Bosshi understood. Even though the boy wanted to appear adult, at heart he was just a child. Suddenly, someone shouted from the kitchen, "Caillou's replacement is coming soon." The cook didn't yet realize that the guy had set up something under the shop. It was his time to work. Dake Bosshi said he could show the stones tomorrow, and the boy beamed with joy. Kai promised to be here again, asked to wait for him at noon. Dake Bosshi agreed. And then the boy remembered another important thing. The guy mentioned that he hadn't introduced himself yet. His name translated to mean ashes. Dake Bosshi also introduced himself. "A cool name," said Kai, and said goodbye until tomorrow. The master smiled. He had not heard such sincere words addressed to him in a very long time. As soon as Kai left, a man approached Dake Bosshi. It was obvious that he was looking for the same craftsman who had been avoiding meetings. It was Hagi Sabia, the humble but powerful lord of the village. He smiled and shook hands with Dake Bosshi. Dake Bosshi returned the greeting, having heard of him before. It was obvious that the lord had something important to say. He leaned over and asked the master to do the same. He whispered softly in her ear, "A red diamond has been found in the village." Dake Bosshi couldn't help but exclaim in delight. The lord asked for silence, and the master immediately covered his mouth with his hand. It was the rarest and most expensive of all colored diamonds. 1 carat of this wonder was worth over 1,000,000. The Lord had not yet finished speaking when Dake Bosshi assured him that he wanted to see him at any cost. The Lord smiled and promised that he would definitely lead him to the stone. Saying goodbye to the Lord, Dake Bosshi couldn't believe his luck. He immediately thought, he should call Kai, he would definitely like it. The next day, the master came to the same place again and apologized to Kai for waiting. He looked at him and asked if everything was okay. He smiled, saying that everything was fine, only his left leg hurt a little. But that happened often. Dake Bosshi sensed that the boy was hiding something. He said he wanted to show Kai an extremely rare diamond and invited him to go together. The boy's face changed dramatically. He stood up. Dake Bosshi didn't understand what had happened. Kai waved his hand. The plate of rice fell to the ground with a loud thud. The master froze, looking at the dinner. He couldn't understand why he had done that. And Kai shouted at him and declared that he was just like all the other idiots. He turned sharply away from Dake Bosshi, who, not understanding anything, jumped up and rushed after him. The master ran after Kai, who quickly disappeared into the depths of the mine. However, fear stopped him at the entrance. The place was large and dark. A whole settlement spread out below, but it was deserted. Dake Bosshi guessed that Kai lived here. And a light flickered in one of the houses. The door of the house was open, and Dake Bosshi noticed the boy lying right on the threshold. He immediately rushed to Kai, running closer. He wanted to make sure that everything was okay, but he saw that Kai was writhing in pain. He asked to show him his leg. Kai resisted, begged not to be touched. But Dake Bosshi tried to calm him down and said he just wanted to help. Suddenly, the Lord's voice came from behind. Smiling, he said that he had been unable to find the master for a long time. It seemed like they had arrived here before him. Dake Bosshi froze in shock, and the Lord approached, intending to say something. What he saw stunned him. On Kai's leg was the very red diamond he was talking about. The Lord smiled and added, "That's not all." With each passing year, as Kai grew older, the crystal grew with him. Its value grew greater and greater. He waited for Dake Bosshi's reaction. They believed that leaving the stone motionless was dangerous. Kai was once kept locked up, but the crystal grew slowly. After walking, it grew faster, so movement improved the quality. The bald subordinate of the Lord grabbed Kai. The boy clung to his hands and begged to be let go. Dake Bosshi called on the Lord to stop it. But the Lord only smiled, repeating the name Kai with a crazy lunation over and over again. The Lord said that the true value was not in Kai, but in something else. He promised to show Dake Bosshi something so great and varied that he would be amazed. The master did not understand anything, and Kai shouted, demanding that it stop. The guy tried to break free, but the subordinate covered his mouth. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a key, and opened the next door. He suggested that Dake Bosshi look at the exhibits. Perhaps he would want to add them to his collection. What the master saw horrified him. Before him was Kai's petrified family. Their bodies were covered in rubies, sapphires, and emeralds. The master could not understand how such a mixture of stones could be possible in one body. Fear appeared in Kai's eyes. He tried to break free again. Dake Bosshi barely restrained himself, asked if the Lord had done all this, but he spread his hands and said mockingly, "Don't make me laugh. He came here after everyone had turned to stone. His caravan was just passing by, and as soon as the villagers found out that he was a jeweler, they immediately called him here. They asked to ransom Kai's entire family, but Dake Bosshi couldn't believe it. The Lord came closer to Kai and smiled coldly. He said, "It's a sad story, selling others for yourself." But no one knew that Kai was the red diamond. No one even realized that people were capable of selling him for nothing, just to escape from here. The Lord tugged at Kai's hair and sighed cynically. It's a shame. They didn't understand the value. Not even Kai himself. He believed the Lord who promised freedom once he paid the debt for his family and the red diamond. And he blindly followed that dream. The Lord leaned down and grabbed Kai by the hair. The stone he hated so much turned out to be so expensive that the boy would never be able to buy it back in his life. Kai couldn't stand it anymore. He spat in the Lord's face in anger. At first, the Lord didn't understand, but then he touched his wet cheeks. His response was instant. He slapped the boy on the cheek with all his strength, not realizing what he was doing. Dake Bosshi rushed to help, but the muscular guard stopped him, knocking him off his feet. The Lord stepped on Kai's back, believing that he should be grateful for everything, especially the stone. It's because of the stone that you're still alive. Without it, you're nothing. the Lord exclaimed, and kicked the boy in the back again. You wouldn't have saved anyone anyway. Kai gritted his teeth, listening to these screams through his tears. They shouted at him that he was powerless until a dirty stone broke him. And suddenly, his petrified leg glowed. Sharp spikes began to grow rapidly from the crystal. The boy screamed. One of the thorns grew enormously deep and almost pierced the Lord. Dake Bosshi did not know how to help. He could only watch in horror. The Lord barely managed to jump back, not understanding what was happening. His ring cracked, and as soon as he noticed it, he broke into a sickly smile. He called to the maid, "Look at this!" She understood. Kai was overheating. His power turned stones into diamonds. He was not in control of her, and if this continued, there would be a catastrophe. The Lord shouted, "Stop him! Cut off his leg if necessary." And the servant obeyed. He swung his katana, but Dake Bosshi rushed forward, covering Kai with himself. He hugged the boy. He was scared, but even scarier was leaving him alone. Kai sobbed in his chest. The blade slid down the master's back. The master gave Kai his earring. Explain everything to people, and ask for help. There are still people in this world to rely on. He was sure that somewhere there was someone who would help. And he smiled. Dake Bosshi stood up, holding the katana hidden under his cloak. He knew there was no way to negotiate with the Lord. He was a blind fool. He gripped the handle of his weapon, thinking of the boy who had been betrayed, abandoned, and used. But he still lived. For his family. The master was amazed by the way this boy fought. His choices, his destiny. The Lord and his men thought all this was more boring than red stone. But after these words, Dake Bosshi drew his flaming katana. Dake Bosshi exclaimed that everyone around him didn't understand true value at all. And then everyone saw. His body began to change right before their eyes. It turned into a huge burning sphere, covering everything around it with fire. The Lord fell to the ground, crying out that he was unbearably hot. And then he saw in Dake Bosshi's hand a dark red blade, a weapon of the ores, studded with stones. It was the ruby sword. The Lord turned to the servant and ordered him to immediately bring the same thing. The servant did not understand what he was talking about, but the Lord roared, "Be quiet and do it." But his smile vanished as the servant's katana slammed into the ground right between his legs. Dake Bosshi disarmed him and swung his ruby sword, realizing that everything had changed now. There was already too much blood. The Lord could not fight any longer. He stood up, noticing that the master's strength was beginning to fade. With his hand raised, the Lord shouted, "You, Dake Bosshi, are not the one who should win." The master only looked up in horror. Sevia summoned his stone beast with diamond fangs, and shouted that this creature was not like his miserable room. It was invincible. Dake Bosshi just grimaced. This guy really has terrible taste, he thought, and fell to his knees. But suddenly the unexpected happened. Kai covered him with himself, protecting him from the blow. Dake Bosshi didn't understand what was happening. He had ordered Kai to run away earlier. But Kai didn't even think about running away. He was happy that Dake Bosshi had told him about the world above, and stood up for him. "Don't tell me such things," Kai begged. But the master promised to tell him even more. Smiling, Dake Bosshi admitted that the boy was right. He had made a promise. So he stood up and asked Kai to lend him some of his strength. Kai agreed. If they were to fight, they would fight together. And Lad, who was standing nearby, also supported them. They could only focus on the enemies. The Lord decided, let them keep only their legs. He had already lost all his strength. But Dake Bosshi just smiled. "Don't worry, we'll handle this." He raised his sword. It glowed. "Somehow we'll pull it out, together." And it was at this moment that he caught sight of the lion leaping. And something important flashed within him. Dake Bosshi concentrated, channeling his power into the blade, trying to change it with his energy. He exclaimed, "Let the sword turn into a diamond." And the blade was immediately covered with a red crystal. Armed with this blade, Dake Bosshi stabbed a lion that charged at him. Using the skill of joint radial dissection, he cut the beast in two. At that moment, a bright flame burst forth and consumed the monster. When the fire died down, a figure appeared in the smoke. Kai couldn't believe his eyes, but it was Dake Bosshi. The master fell to the ground, and Kai instantly rushed to him. Smiling, Dake Bosshi admitted that he wouldn't have won with just the ruby. He thanked Kai for saving him, but he noticed that something was wrong with the boy. Kai said he was just thinking, the stones he hated so much were saved today. Dake Bosshi remembered his words. The stones simply exist. They are not to blame. Kai smiled sadly, admitting that it was true, and he thought, Maybe he too could become as strong as Dake Bosshi. And if he does, he can find that man with the red earring and 3 lines to learn how to cure himself. And suddenly he fell to his knees. With wide eyes he begged, so that Dake Bosshi would take him as a student. At that moment, the master realized that he himself had once been like that. And he asked Kai if he remembered what he had to return. The boy took an earring out of his pocket and handed it to the master. Dake Bosshi smiled and thanked him, a sign of trust. But when Kai lowered his eyes, he suddenly felt his ear feel heavy. Dake Bosshi didn't have time to say anything to him, because now he had an apprentice. And according to tradition, the master passes his earring to the apprentice. Kai touched the earring in surprise, and Dake Bosshi could barely contain his joy. And his heart flared with fire again, as when he first found that fiery red stone. Just like then, he wanted to see that glow again and again. That was what Dake Bosshi was thinking about. Mixing joy with pain in his leg, Kai hugged his teacher, and he whispered, "Hold on." Thus began their common fate. In my memories, little Kai drew the sky with colored pencils, amazed that it really was like that. He goes through his things and remembers how laughter used to reign in the house. His father would smile and explain to his wife that he had been asked to paint a landscape. He turned to his sister Haku, dreaming that when they grew up, they would see the outside world together. The girl happily agreed, but now her parents are petrified, and Haku lies scared on the bed. Kai gently covers her with a blanket, promising to wait a while. He leaned over his sister and assured her that his older brother would definitely find a cure. He looked at his mother and swore to his parents that he would definitely come back for them. As he left the house, he saw the teacher pouring some kind of liquid on a scroll with symbols. Dake Bosshi smiled. It seemed that the boy was saying goodbye. But Kai asked suspiciously what he was doing near his house. The master only replied, "A protective message." Kai didn't understand what he meant, but Dake Bosshi knew. The boy wasn't ready to leave his family yet. After finishing the inscription, he folded his hands into a seal. His palms caught fire as he prepared to create a protective stone cage. And at that moment, crystals burst from the ground, surrounding Kai's house. The boy froze in surprise. The stones appeared out of nowhere. The master smiled, shaking his hands. With formulas, greenery, and conditions, it's not difficult. Kai asked what the stone was called. He reached for it because it looked like ice. But Dake Bosshi stopped him in time. "This crystal freezes anyone who touches it." He threw something to Kai and said, "This is for you." He barely caught the thing, saying it had fallen too close to the stone. Dake Bosshi smiled. Cool reflex. The guy opened it. Inside was a fragment of ulexite. The master improved the stone and split it into 2 halves. Now Kai could transfer images from one fragment to the other and see his family at any time. He looked at the find in surprise. He couldn't believe that such stones existed. But then he sighed heavily and returned to reality. He lowered his head. He didn't allow himself to rejoice. After all, that's not what he's here for. He has to cure his parents. And he'll do whatever it takes. Dake Bosshi heard him and asked what he was thinking. This caught Kai by surprise. He even jumped up on the spot. The master nodded. "Let's go." But he stopped. He said, "What about saying goodbye to his family?" But Kai replied decisively. He hadn't yet. The boy had always dreamed of climbing up, but climbing the stairs with one leg was not easy. Dake Bosshi asked if he was okay. He offered to carry him on his back, but Kai flatly refused. He was already 15. He didn't consider himself a child, and was confident that he could make it on his own. He stopped, asked to go without him, and after a rest he would catch up. After thinking for a moment, Kai pointed forward and asked, "Is there really a way out?" Dake Bosshi remembered that this was Kai's first time coming to the surface. The boy nodded. The master pushed him forward. "Then let this step be unforgettable." Kai caught his toes and asked not to push. At that moment, he remembered his sister's words. He apologized to Haku for himself and promised. One day they would climb up here together. Closing his eyes from the bright light, Kai took his first step to the surface. "This is cool," he whispered. The sky was exactly the color my father had once told me about. He immediately noticed a large stone in the shape of a dragon's head and asked in surprise what it was. Dake Bosshi momentarily forgot that it was the first time Kai had seen it. This dragon was created when an ancient creature was petrified. It is said that the power of the orange stones belonged to this dragon. Kai was stunned, and Dake Bosshi suddenly blushed. He felt embarrassed and asked, or was he disappointed? After all, Kai was his first student, and he himself did not yet know how to teach properly. Dake Bosshi decided to be honest. and he asked, "Can you teach me? How can I teach you?" Kai looked surprised. He didn't understand what this was about. He thought that Dake Bosshi should simply pass on to him what he had learned himself. But the latter hesitated with his answer, because he didn't remember how he himself studied. And it became unclear to Kai what his studies would be like. Then Dake Bosshi asked how Kai learned to cook. The boy thought for a moment. He just repeated. He was shown an example, and then he acted on his own. He also read, "Here," the master exclaimed. But Kai was already beginning to doubt whether he had made the right choice of mentor. The artist offered to show something. Kai was scared. He didn't understand what was happening. And suddenly the ground in front of him shook, cracked, and began to collapse downward. A huge live dragon burst out of the ground right under their feet and stared at Kai. He jumped aside and shouted, "They're going to eat us now!" The teacher instantly grabbed Kai and saved him. But before he could thank him, he realized they were flying. Dake Bosshi explained that it was all thanks to the neodymium magnets in his shoes, a super-powerful diamagnetic ore. The master had amplified their power, and the repulsion from the magnets on the ground allowed them to rise into the air. Kai muttered in surprise, "That's so like you." Dake Bosshi just smiled, but Kai suddenly shouted, "Look ahead!" Right in front of them, the dragon opened its mouth, preparing to attack. Dake Bosshi threw the small horse into the water nearby and activated the boost. Stone pillars rose from the water and struck the dragon. But the beast destroyed everything, and Kai shouted that it didn't work. The master decided it was time to move on to another trick. He leapt onto a ledge of stone that had been carved out of the rock and struck the dragon squarely in the jaw. But the rock began to crumble as he struck. Dake Bosshi thrust another horse into the air and activated the fire. The stone shattered into sharp fragments, which pierced the dragon, and the monster fell. Kai watched the battle in amazement. For the first time, he began to understand what the ore craftsman's ability to manipulate stones really meant. The master used the natural properties of stones, magnetism, transformations, energy, and suddenly Kai noticed an aquamarine ring on Dake Bosshi's hand. The master used the power of the gemstone. With the aquamarine, Dake Bosshi created a wave of water that covered the beast. Then he snapped his fingers and caused lightning to strike through the tourmaline. The dragon was struck by an electric shock. As soon as it died down, Dake Bosshi and Kai landed softly on the ground. When they got closer, they saw that the monster had turned into sand. The master picked up a small pebble and said, "This is real pleasure." He was glowing with happiness. Dake Bosshi leaned against the stone, for ore craftsmen lived to collect stones from petrified monsters. Kai sighed. "So, that's me." But his breath froze in his chest. A terrible roar sounded from behind, and the rocks began to crumble. Another creature emerged from them. Dake Bosshi stepped aside and said, "Your turn, student. Give me all you can." The monster struck Kai with its mace right in front of his face. He was frightened. Sweat dripped from his forehead. He screamed and ran away, pleading, "I tried." But he stopped for a moment. He thought, even if he turned it into a diamond, it wouldn't change anything. But what if it were the other way around? If we turn the monster into stone, that's the goal. Kai turned to face the beast. He pointed his hand at the monster's mace. I will stop you," he said quietly. His cry was weak, and only a thin film of diamond touched the enemy's weapon. He had to dodge again, and the teacher silently watched from the sidelines. Kai gathered all the energy he had and channeled it to awaken the stone's hidden power. But with jewels, it's different. To unleash their power, you need to tune into the direction of the energy of the stone itself. This is extremely difficult. Dake Bosshi used the element of fire as a conductor. This power can be honed through training, but the tuning depends on compatibility and talent. He jokingly said that Kai is still weak, but the fact that he can do it already means that he will make a great student. Suddenly, Kai tripped and fell. Turning his head, he saw the monster swinging his mace, and he screamed. He jumped up and ran towards the dead end, not knowing what to do next. We had to think quickly. How to deal with such a destructive force. At some point, Kai looked at his hand and thought he was at a dead end. Dake Bosshi watched from above. It seemed like it was time to give up. But suddenly, Kai began to turn the wall nearby into a diamond, and the teacher could not understand what he was up to. The dragon had already swung his mace. Dake Bosshi thought it was the end. He readied his ruby sword for protection. But Kai held out his hand and shouted, "Now you will get what you deserve!" The master watched in delight as the boy raised a rock right under the monster's feet. The monster stumbled, dropped its weapon, and fell to the ground. The huge body almost crushed Kai, but he managed to jump back in time. He looked at the defeated beast. The fall must have been painful, but Kai raised his fist up. I won! But the joy did not last long. The dragon twitched. Dake Bosshi instantly stood in front of Kai and activated Ruby Breakthrough, smiling at the student, and didn't have time to say anything. Kai fell down, passed out from exhaustion. But Dake Bosshi immediately calmed down. The boy had simply passed out. He patted him on the head and said, "Good job." A moment later, Kai opened his eyes. He didn't know where he was. The place didn't feel like home. Everything around was in disarray. He went to the door. As soon as he opened it, a cool wind blew into his face. What kind of place is this? He thought. He looked around and realized he had woken up on a real, huge turtle. And his questions grew even more. The turtle turned to him and spoke. It turned out that she was speaking. Kai couldn't believe it. Meanwhile, Dake Bosshi landed softly on her shell. Dake Bosshi explained that this turtle was his transport, friend and home, and its name was Bo. Kai was surprised how many strange creatures there were here. The master was only proud. The sparkle in Kai's eyes never faded as he held the diamond he had taken from the petrified beast. It was his first real reward, and Dake Bosshi was happy for him. He told Kai that he was not just a stone that could be used. The boy thought for a moment and remembered the Lord's words. You are a dirty stone. You won't solve anything. It hurt, but Dake Bosshi looked up to the sky and said, You can be whoever you want to be. Kai tilted his head. I'm a terrible person, he whispered. He still blamed himself for leaving his parents and Haku in the dark, alone. And through tears he said, I have no right to be happy. Dake Bosshi didn't understand this. He didn't see any guilt in it. But he decided that Kai should know this. Even if his family knew the truth, they would never call him a terrible person. An image of a happy family flashed through Kai's mind. He hit himself sharply on the head, surprising Dake Bosshi. The boy turned to him to say something important. At first hesitantly, but then clearly, Thank you for everything. The master smiled, and at that moment Bo, the turtle, announced that they had arrived. They reached the center of the ore craftsmen, the Miners' Federation. The city on the surface was impressive. It was protected by stone walls. Dake Bosshi explained, That's not all. But Kai almost forgot. You can't lose your head over just one stone beast. He was ready. He swore to himself, one day he would find that man. His stomach loudly reminded him of itself. But Kai decided to put things in order first. And with a burning heart, he took a step into a new world. He still didn't understand why rocks couldn't be turned into diamonds. But the essence of the power of gemstones is in revealing hidden potential, not in destruction. Kai's power was completely different. It changed the very essence of the material. It was an exceptional gift. But in the Federation, its use was forbidden. Dake Bosshi sat down next to him and explained that he could use this power because of the red diamond in his body. And Kai understood that. But even he didn't know what kind of strain this was putting on the boy's body. So the teacher suggested continuing the training in special Magno shoes. Kai suspected there was some trick to it. They moved on. Finally, the Federation! Kai was amazed by its size, but Dake Bosshi said, It's only a small part. The city, being on the surface, was repeatedly attacked by stone monsters. But the master explained, They are repelled by a special wave that comes from the ore in the tower. This is how large cities protect themselves. He suggested that Kai approach the diamond. The boy obediently followed the instructions. But suddenly, a flash. The light flew straight into Kai's earring and then bounced off the wall. The stone cave of gems opened before them. Kai asked in surprise what was happening, but Dake Bosshi was already pulling his sleeve. It's narrow and dark here. Be careful. In the cave, they saw something strange. A group of soldiers with lanterns stood in the darkness. Their faces were tense. The soldiers recognized Dake Bosshi. They bowed and welcomed him back to the Mother Stone and the Miners' Federation. A whole stone metropolis opened up before Kai, and he was amazed. The streets were bustling with people. Everyone was busy with their own business. I've never seen machines like these, Kai muttered. Dake Bosshi explained that most of the residents were artisans, loaders, processors. However, when he mentioned the bureau, his smile faded. I don't really like this place, he apologized. The bureau has shut down all illegal activities of the artisans. And it seems they are already following the guy who transforms people. Dake Bosshi didn't know how to explain it gently. He called them too arrogant. And then a loud voice was heard calling Mr. Dake Bosshi. They raised their heads. A man jumped on top of them and exclaimed, "How much time has passed?" And immediately after him, a short girl appeared, more like a child. Her name was Ku. She was from the first department of the Audit Bureau. She came to congratulate me. Kai did not understand what this bureau was, and looked at Ku in confusion. She, in turn, asked in surprise who it was. Dake Bosshi introduced him as his student, Kai. But Ku didn't let him finish. She interrupted, "Is this a joke?" She didn't understand why there was so much fuss about. That's it. It turned out that Dake Bosshi had once even refused to teach her. And now he took some village idiot as his student? Kai squinted and asked her to repeat. Ku jokingly added, "Pale skin, old-fashioned clothes, unwashed hair. Everything fits the description, and he acts like a tourist near Dake Bosshi." She was sure he was a village fool. The master tried to reassure Kai there was nothing shameful in it. But he hid in the shadows. If Dake Bosshi says that, does that mean he also thinks Kai is just a peasant? The master objected, and Ku puffed out her cheeks and called him an insult again. She clenched her wand and challenged Kai. He was stunned and asked her to stop. But Ku's gaze was determined. Kai turned to the teacher, and he quickly figured out how to avoid a fight. He asked Dake Bosshi to buy sweets, but the master hesitated, not wanting to leave them alone. As soon as he left, Kai asked, "Why does she hate him so much that he became an apprentice?" She replied, "Because the village fool doesn't understand that she is a very important person in the Miners' Federation. She was elected as the youngest representative of the Ruby Pillar, one of the 12 stone pillars. She is the captain of the first division of the Audit Bureau. Everyone envied her flame, the strongest of all rubies, even Dake Bosshi, and that's why he didn't want to take any disciples, because he didn't find anyone worthy." Ku shouted, "You couldn't have chosen him," saying it was just pity for the unworthy. She wanted to prove him worthless. She insulted him again. But Kai clenched his fist, slapped his palm, and accepted her challenge. "Stop calling me that!" he shouted. But Ku just smiled, and a strange man stood on one of the towers. He liked the view. He didn't even pay attention to the commotion below. At that moment, the landscape looked exactly like in the legends. Dake Bosshi turned his head sharply to one of the towers and dropped the things from his hands. The woman next to him apologized and pointed to the object that had fallen. The master shouted. The rules of the competition were simple. Whoever reached the bell tower first won. The crowd began to cheer Ku. Kai noticed how it seemed like Ku was about to cry. She was supported only by the grandparents in the crowd. They shouted, "Come by later for pies," and promised her favorite dishes. Kai clarified, "So, is this going to be a regular race?" Ku chuckled. "Just don't tell me you can't use shoes." She hinted at the magnetic ones. "Even a 5-year-old can." Kai blushed and lied that he could, of course. Because she had the power of the gem, Ku allowed Kai a 1-minute lead. He shrugged. "That's generous." Kai added, "Just don't feel sorry if you lose." "Speak for yourself," the girl smiled. Grabbing her magic whip, she swung it and announced the start. Kai ran, thinking he had a whole minute. But Ku swung her whip again and used the Eye of the Tiger technique. A huge tiger with a saddle appeared next to her. "You're dealing with the Bureau's best beastman," she exclaimed. Kai was stunned. "You better hurry up if you don't want to get eaten," Ku added. The guy shouted and ran away. "This isn't funny anymore." With a leg like that, he definitely won't be able to escape. The only way out is to use magnetic boots. If you keep your balance, everything will work out. That's what Kai thought. But as soon as he activated the boots, he fell to the ground. People laughed. Yeah, first time. Kai came to his senses and was horrified. His moment was almost over. Ku looked at the stopwatch. "Time is up," and she ordered the tiger. He rushed forward. She was looking for Kai, but she didn't see him. And suddenly, she tripped. Kai was behind her, smiling. He used a magnetic cable. "I don't lose my balance with this." He ran next to Ku, but she didn't expect such a turn. But suddenly he crashed into a box at full speed. Ku just exclaimed, "Idiot!" Meanwhile, the man on the tower pondered the plan and watched. Dake Bosshi sensed something strange and turned around. And Kai became wary for no reason. There was an explosion. Stone blocks flew towards the city. One of the fragments, that man from the tower watched calmly. "Everything must be efficient," he said, and he decided to start searching for the red diamond. The explosion awakened the stone dragon, which began to destroy the city. One of the guards stood in front of it and ordered the inhabitants to flee. But before the dragon could strike, Dake Bosshi stopped it and struck with the ruby cut technique. Then he activated Spiral Flame, and the sword caught fire. "Run!" he shouted to the guard, and he obeyed. The master guessed. There was a barrier on the tower. In his mind, he turned to Kai and Ku. "Be safe." Kai didn't understand what was happening. He asked Ku, but she silently grabbed him by the collar and lifted him up. A child's cry could be heard nearby. The toddler tried to lift his wounded mother. She begged her daughter to run away, but the girl did not leave. Kai shouted, "They are!" He jumped out of the tiger's mouth and rushed towards them, but Ku stopped him. At that moment, another block flew towards the family. And Kai thought, "I prayed that at least this time I would make it." And he couldn't believe his eyes. The fragments that were supposed to crush mother and daughter turned into a diamond. His power became stronger than ever. The mother thanked Kai. "I saw it was you." He replied that it was a trifle. But the woman said, "The central district is now an evacuation zone." She and her daughter went there. And Ku was already telling everyone about the hero's power. Kai blushed. They guessed him. Ku noted that the Bureau of Investigation would probably have questions for him. But she added that he had done a great job. Nothing less was expected of Mr. Dake Bosshi's student. Kai was surprised. Meanwhile, the family that Kai had saved came across the same mysterious man standing on the tower. The mother apologized, saying that the road to the central district was in a different direction. The man just smiled and thanked them. And suddenly the bodies of the mother, daughter, and boy cracked. And in an instant, they turned into crystal. The man smiled coldly. "Perfect." Everyone around froze in horror. Kai saw it too. He froze, not believing his eyes, staring at the stranger. And at that very moment he rushed at him, grabbed him by the clothes and threw him to the ground. He couldn't help himself. "Give my family back!" he shouted in rage. The man, a little surprised, adjusted his round black glasses. He took off his glasses and showed his crystal eye. He smiled. "Why return them? They're perfect as they are." Kai was completely confused. The man added, "I'm just looking for someone. If you don't get off, you'll be the next crystal." Recognition flashed in Kai's eyes. This earring was the same as the one that had transformed his family. He swung, but Ku's whip caught his hand and threw it aside. She gave the tiger a command, and the beast rushed at the enemy. The tiger grabbed him, but the stranger simply put his crystal hand in his mouth. A cracking sound. He seemed to even like it. A moment later, the tiger turned into crystal and never moved again. Kai shouted for Ku to call for reinforcements, but she didn't understand what he was up to. He decided to keep this bastard here. Ku still hesitated, but Kai shouted, "Hurry up!" And she ran, promising to return with help. But the stranger already understood that Kai wanted an answer from him. "I have one question," the boy said. 3 years ago, you turned my family to stone," Kai shouted at him. He thought for a moment, saying, 3 years ago. "Father, mother, little sister. And my left leg," Kai clarified. And he just scratched the back of his head, trying to remember. Then he laughed. "Unbelievable. I didn't think I'd find you so quickly." Kai was surprised again. He was looking for me? The stranger remembered everything. Kai's father stood in front of him, shouting to his wife and child, "Run!" His sister was crying. His mother was hugging her. And to him, it all seemed a beautiful, sculptural scene. He smiled. That was a nice composition. And just then, a light flashed on Kai's crystal. Something snapped inside Kai. Anger gripped his entire body. Power erupted outward, creating huge crystalline spikes. The stranger immediately understood that this was the same red diamond. He pulled out an antimonite sword with a black return wave. Kai created a crystal wall to at least somehow stop the blade. His crystal leg ached. He fell to his knees. He didn't understand why now. The stranger with the sword approached. "Now I see the real you." He grabbed Kai's face with a crystal hand. "Don't breathe. Antimony is poisonous." He pressed it against the wall, examining the crystal leg. He smiled. "Yes, that's right. A red diamond. I heard about you. From a fat merchant." Kai understood. He was talking about the lord from his village. The man sighed and said sympathetically, "It must be hard with a leg like that. And all this to cure my parents and sister. Sweat, blood." And then he added, "And you also found a teacher who sympathized with you. So you set out on your journey, with hope, and with determination." The stranger smiled. "Great. And how lucky we were to meet again in the end. How shameful, he added. Usually in moments like this, the hero defeats the Demon King. And here he is a prisoner himself. Just like 3 years ago. He approached Kai. You haven't changed at all over the years. A useless hero. He can't even shout back. And Kai thought, he was right. He didn't get stronger. He didn't get faster. And yet, something changed. He grabbed the man's hand. I'm not alone anymore, he exclaimed, and activated the power of the teacher's earring. It flashed, and Kai used the ruby blood circle technique. The stranger recoiled from the blinding light, and suddenly saw before him not Kai, but an angry Dake Bosshi. Kai remembered what they called him, Dirty Stone. He wasn't strong, he wasn't smart, he wasn't fast. That's why he never dreamed. It was a shame to be wrong, and to lose hope was even worse. So Kai always thought it was better to just give up. But now he could say it with confidence. The teacher stood before him, extending his hand with a smile. His eyes were closed tightly. Everything was floating. The world was spinning. He began to understand who was nearby. He saw Dake Bosshi. He smiled, apologized, and suddenly grabbed Kai by the crystal leg. He saw blood. It was probably a result of the force's backlash. Breathe deeply, Kai, said the teacher. The stone responded to the state of mind. When the mind is calm, so is the red diamond. But when he touched the back of Kai's head, he saw blood. You need to stay here and rest. Kai whispered, I am the one who wears the 3-banded earring. Dake Bosshi froze, and he realized. Everything was coming together. He looked at Kai, then at the enemy. It was time to act. Crystals began to appear around the stranger, and he screamed. But Kai was already different. The stranger scratched his head. I never thought that Dake Bosshi would become a mentor. But blood of the pigeon is still beautiful, he added. Dake Bosshi was wary of the nickname. At that moment, an antimony attack flew at him, black poisonous fangs. He created a crystal sphere, ordering Kai to stay there, and he himself began to dodge attacks, closing in on the enemy. But the stranger shouted, I'm not finished yet. But Dake Bosshi had already rushed forward. He bypassed the enemy and found himself behind. He wanted to strike, but his sword hit the crystals that had suddenly grown. Antimonite is brittle, but the stranger mixed it with synthesized silver to make it more stable. Sharp fragments rained down on Dake Bosshi. He dodged. Kai wondered why he hadn't used his flute. Antimonite may not glow, but it is very poisonous. If you touch it, it will burn you. And if you set it on fire, it will release a toxic gas. The stranger smiled. He liked it. Dake Bosshi jumped high, but the crystals chased him even in the air. Kai was worried, but the master said that, at that moment, the ground around the enemy cracked. Flaming ruby binding was activated. Kai understood. The teacher had calculated everything. The crystals should have weakened. But the enemy laughed. Don't jump to conclusions. He said that mother and daughter could also become sand. Dake Bosshi hesitated for a moment. Kai shouted, Teacher! From a height he saw people turning to stone. They had not yet crumbled. Dake Bosshi counted each one, and when their eyes met his, they whispered, Thank you. And a look appeared on his face. The stranger held up several crystals in front of Kai's petrified family and declared, if Dake Bosshi moved, he would break them. He pointed numerous crystals at the master and ordered him not to make any movement. One of the fragments pierced Dake Bosshi's shoulder through and through. He screamed. Kai rushed to the teacher, not knowing how to help. But the enemy ordered him not to move. This was not the end. The crystals crashed into the master's body. Kai begs to stop, but the man replied, I still have a lot to do. Finally, he decided to stop. Disappointed that Dake Bosshi, despite all his brilliance, had lost. The master's detector sphere cracked, and he himself fell to the ground. Kai rushed to the wounded teacher. His body was covered in wounds. The boy thought, all this was because of his desire to dream. He blamed himself, but the enemy pushed him away. Go away, Red Diamond. Stop this, said Kai. I only came for the red stone. He moved towards the enemy, but Dake Bosshi grabbed his arm. Let go! This is the only way out, Kai begged. No, the teacher said quietly. You're a smart boy, and you should understand. This path is an escape, not a victory. Dake Bosshi, as before, asked Kai, Give me your power. He put a stone in his hand. Pray to him. If you do it from a sincere heart, he will answer. Kai held the stone, not understanding how. It would be better if I had never dreamed. Then the teacher would. Dake Bosshi reached out, patted his head. When I found you in the village, I saw the light in your eyes. You didn't give up. You promised to save your family. Don't let these feelings fade. Stone is a miracle between man and nature. Without hope, he is just a pebble. Kai wondered. Maybe he should have dreamed. Maybe he had the right to hope. He squeezed the stone. This time he wouldn't do it for himself, and for the sake of the mentor who was always there, the one who taught him to dream. And for him, he is ready to do anything. The stone shone. A blinding light enveloped everyone. The enemy, who had been listening to their conversation, admitted it was even pleasant to listen to. He extended his petrified hand to the heroes. It's a pity it's time for you to become a sculpture. Kai focused on the stone, and he shouted. The light grew stronger, and struck the enemy with a reflected flash. Dake Bosshi couldn't believe it. Kai had managed to use reflected radiance. Meanwhile, the Audit Bureau received a report. The barrier in the northwest has been restored. The entire focus is on destroying the enemy. 2 units joined the battle. Ku called out to her mentor, but immediately corrected herself, the captain of the 1st Division. In the southwest quarter, an artist is turning people to stone. Immediate help is needed, she added. She thought about how important the history of stones is. It all depends on the craftsman, and each stone has many facets. The brilliance of the diamond is its response. The counterattack reflects the essence of the stone itself. The enemy admitted, that was not bad, but I don't think you can do it again. Kai fainted, and the master picked him up. The enemy, not surprised, ordered Dake Bosshi, don't move. The stranger again threatened to smash the remains of the petrified family. But suddenly someone shouted, Dake Bosshi-sensei, don't be afraid! And the master looked around. It was Ku. She cut all the crystals with her whip. Dake Bosshi was glad to see her. She looked at the unconscious Kai and apologized for the delay. The rescue team was already here. Standing next to her was Saken, the captain of the Bureau's 1st unit. He said he had come to help and was at Dake Bosshi-sensei's complete disposal. The master grabbed the sword, thanked him, and used the ruby strike of burning flame, rushing into battle. The enemy reminds, if you use fire, there will be poisonous gas. Then Ku introduced her gemstone, lapis lazuli. She created threads of purification. They absorbed all the toxic smoke. The lapis lazuli sphere neutralized the poison. The support medic ran up to Dake Bosshi. You're alive! Let me heal your wounds! But the master pointed at Kai. Him first, he bought us time. Dake Bosshi had already cauterized most of his wounds, but the medic decided to help anyway. Meanwhile, Kai lay motionless. The lapis lazuli sphere cracked and crumbled. The enemy howled, blood flowing from his hand. But Dake Bosshi did not hesitate, attacking from behind. The enemy managed to block the blow with a thin staff, and with irony he said, You are always surrounded by friends. As always, Mr. Shining Stone. And how many have you crushed going towards the ideal? The enemy added. These words hit Dake Bosshi painfully. In response, the enemy released crystals from the wand. One nearly sliced open the master's face, but Dake Bosshi managed to dodge and ended up behind the enemy. He seized the moment and kicked him. Saken nodded to his partner. Our time. Both of them focused. The city trembled, and silver objects began to glow. The captain of the Bureau's 2nd Division activated the power of ability transfer. Through the townspeople's silver jewelry, he was able to transfer their energy to his allies. Dake Bosshi's sword flashed with bright fire. Its power increased. The enemy noticed. The flames had become even more powerful. The force of the impact was such that it broke windows and shook houses. The captain of the Northern Division had come from afar. For him, it was almost like a punishment. The captain of the 4th Division, Rusha, used the Demon's Kiss technique. His stone was a black agate that split space. At the same time, he activated the mineral transfer of the 3rd captain. People at home didn't understand what was happening to their silverware. It started to glow. Someone asked Rasha where he had sent everything. To the next street, he replied. Saken asked Cheetos about Kai's condition. He said, overwork and a blow to the head. Who would have thought that the ore crafters were so strong? Cheetos smiled. Kai came to his senses. Maybe I should have helped with something? But Cheetos calmed him down. Your overload is already too much. Kai jumped up and he laughed. I'm kidding. The captain of the rescue squad is the owner of the heliotrope stone. His ability is healing. He wanted to calm Kai down. Since there are no more hostages, we have no right to lose. Someone from the squad shouted. Dake Bosshi cut off the enemy's stone hand. It grew back. He cut it again. The enemy realized, Regeneration had slowed down, but he tried to grab Dake Bosshi. "You are mine!" But Dake Bosshi's body crumbled like an illusion. A group stood nearby. One of the girls smiled. "I directed you where you need to go." It was Shirai, the captain of the 5th Division. Her stone was appetite. She created illusions, and she warned that was not the real Dake Bosshi. The real Dake Bosshi appeared right above the enemy's head. "I'm already used to envious people like you." Dake Bosshi didn't consider himself better than others. He just lived. And if someone wanted to hate him, that was their choice. He asked for only one thing: to return the life that this man had taken from the boy. The master unleashed a barrage of heavenly flames, even hitting his allies. Shirai shouted, "Idiot! Calm down." The flames fell upon the enemy. Saken immediately ordered the evacuation of civilians. The squad captains rushed to carry out the order. However, the enemy stopped. Another girl appeared behind him. She thought that her partner would cope with the red diamond, but he lost. The man looked gloomy. "I don't." She rushed towards the battlefield, but Saken stopped her. Everyone was wounded. The battle must be ended. One of the captains grumbled, "There's nothing honorable in this escape." Dake Bosshi glanced at his enemy one last time. He could barely stand and asked for help. Dake Bosshi smiled. This time, yes. He hugged Kai and Ku. They were alive, and that was enough. Meanwhile, the enemy was telling the girl that he didn't lose. She decided not to argue. It was easier for him. He looked at the shard of diamond in his hand. The seed had already sprouted, and left a disturbing shadow behind it. The heroes were led to the Federation medical tower. The enemy with the antimonite disappeared. According to Ku, Kai had an energy failure due to excess power, and fell into a fever. He was unconscious for 3 days and nights. Finally, he woke up. The wounded Dake Bosshi was sitting next to him, watching him with worry in his eyes. When Kai fully recovered, they set off for the eastern headquarters of the Mining Federation. But Kai wasn't ready. He was summoned to an official meeting. They were met by the Chief of Staff. It was clear that this man had great authority. Everything indicated that this was someone extremely important. They were clearly told, before you stands the former Ruby Pillar number 12, Dake Bosshi, and the bearer of the Red Diamond. They confirmed their identities. The lady smiled at Kai. Nice to meet you. Don't worry so much. But the boy still couldn't understand what was happening. Lady Mimu couldn't speak in sound. She created vibrations through the crystal. Her maid turned them into speech. The boys should listen carefully. The lady began with Kai. Show me your red diamond. The boy looked at Dake Bosshi, asking permission with his eyes. He nodded. Kai helped the lady up the stairs and showed her the crystal. It immediately glowed. She leaned towards his leg, examining the stone carefully. It's worth 1 billion, judging by its size. It's a real red diamond, no doubt about it. She got too close, and Kai tensed. She said, You need to be protected. She continued, and Master Dake Bosshi should be punished. Kai couldn't believe his ears. Why? They explained to him. Dake Bosshi did not inform the Federation, and they are obliged to control all rare stones. That is, he was suspected of wanting to appropriate the diamond. Kai was confused. The older woman asked, Did you believe he was only kind to you because of the stone? The guy froze. But Kai replied firmly, No, I don't believe that. He was good, because he wanted to be good. The lady looked at the crystal silently. It hasn't changed. The stone is pure. Then she said, In that case, I want to hear both of your stories. Dake Bosshi did not object. Yes, the report had been delayed, and it was a conscious decision. The red diamond demanded special treatment, and he was afraid that if he did, the Federation would immediately step in. They would protect the stone, even at the cost of isolating the city, and Kai wouldn't be able to leave. That's why he's here, to ask permission in person. Lady Mimu's advisor exploded. How dare you say that? Kai looked at her in confusion, and then at Dake Bosshi, who was already kneeling before the lady. He bowed to the very ground, begging to be allowed to set out on the journey together. Everyone was stunned. Why was he humiliating himself like that? The counselor called him a fool. This stone is worth 1 billion, and you just want to leave? But Lady Mimu calmly asked him to wait. She wanted to hear the boy's opinion. He was excited. With a trembling voice, Kai knelt down. I want to leave Dake Bosshi. I have one request. Lady reached out to stop him. Children shouldn't bow down to us. It's not humiliating them, it's humiliating us. She understood Dake Bosshi's action as a teacher, but the Federation is an organization. They need a guarantee of benefit from this trip. Dake Bosshi replied, "Don't worry. I will find the culprit. I will catch the antimonite artisan." But the counselor objected. "We are looking for him ourselves. That is not enough." And he tore the dust from Kai as from an extremely precious stone. "This man," added the lady, "was once one of us." Saken flinched at her words. Dake Bosshi could provide confirmation, even if this was their first meeting. The nickname Pigeon's Blood caused surprise. There was something unusual about it. Kai didn't understand anything. He didn't even know what it meant. The counselor wanted to say something, but the lady interrupted him. "This is a dark snake. The one who knows this name is also an antimonite artisan, a fugitive from the Federation. His name is Kuratoba, a former member of the Federation. Now he turns people to stone. If this becomes known, the organization's reputation will fall. But there was something else. Kuratoba was being pursued by the Red Diamond. Lady realized that if they went on a journey, it would lure him in. The idea seemed worth considering. She agreed. "Your guarantees will be taken into account." The counselor jumped, but the decision was made. She allowed Kai and Dake Bosshi to leave, as the best of the chosen ones. And she added, "I didn't expect to see tears from a person who once didn't want to take students. But with age comes wisdom." The embarrassed master thanked him. After the meeting, Lord Lure apologized to Lady Mimu. "How can I explain this to the staff?" And the boys were already leaving the palace. On the way out, Kai sighed. "I understand why you hated this place. It's really stuffy here." Lure also apologized for using Kai as bait, but the boy replied, "It's okay. Kuratoba was after me anyway." They would set out to catch him and kill two birds with one stone. But Kai's thoughts wouldn't let go. Why did Dake Bosshi choose him as his disciple? He had never had one before. Everyone was just talking about it. That's not all. He did so much for Kai, even though he knew so little about him. And it bothered the boy. But the teacher, as if reading his thoughts, stood up. "It may sound trite, but I'll tell you." And he told me. 4 years ago he worked at the Carbon Federation Bureau. But he felt like a stranger there. People said, for him, everyone is equal. But for that, they hated him twice as much. The name Dove's Blood is not just a nickname. It is the name of a first-class ruby. Pure, deep, like blood. When he was chosen to be the bearer of this ruby, everyone began to call him that. Dake Bosshi hated the name. He felt suffocated in the bureau, and eventually fled the Federation. Dake Bosshi traveled with the old man, searching for the stones he loved so much. He simply lived as he wanted. But everything changed after Medokaya asked him to become his apprentice. Then Dake Bosshi realized that he could no longer live only for himself, and I felt unexpected happiness. This story moved Kai. He was sure that the master was speaking sincerely. He didn't believe that Blood of the Pigeon was a common nickname. Dake Bosshi mentioned the 12 pillars of stone, but he was hiding much more. The hero exclaimed that he would train. This frightened the master. It seemed to him that the boy did not believe in himself, and therefore wanted to become stronger. Not only to get my family back, but also to protect myself, freedom, and a dozen other reasons. But most importantly, he wanted to thank his teacher, to become stronger, to justify his trust. Meanwhile, the advisor turned to Lady Mimu again. He didn't believe she would really release the Red Diamond, but she replied, "Only until Kuratoba is captured. Her plan is to divert attention from the diamond now so she can deal with the threat later. But she still leaves a watch. A spotter has been sent to Kai." She handed the advisor tiny crystallized objects, spy jetstones. The advisor didn't believe Kuratoba would go so far as to turn people to stone, but the lady replied, "If Dake Bosshi and the boy find out about this, I will let them destroy everything as if nothing had happened." New hopes awaited them, and new conspiracies. Kai was officially allowed to travel with the master. Dake Bosshi chose new clothes for him. He was delighted, until he saw them. Kai did not want to wear such a cloak, but Dake Bosshi was shocked. "This is the apprentice's cloak. You have to wear it." At this moment, Saken came up and announced they had been assigned a personal guard. It was Ku. Self-confident, impudent. Kai didn't understand why she was a guard, but she replied, "I won't leave Dake Bosshi alone with you." The master asked Saken again, and he shrugged. "We don't even know what they decided upstairs." Then he asked Ku about one item, and she began to rummage through her pockets. She took out a black onyx pearl, the basis for the emergency system. It had the power of spatial transfer. If it was filled with conductive energy, Kai would be able to instantly return. It was a form of protection for the diamond. Bosshi understood everything and placed a hand on the student's shoulder. The master bowed before Sakin and promised to protect his student, even at the cost of his own life. Kai looked at Ku, who had left everything for him. The guy apologized to her, but she replied, "No need to apologize. It's Kuratoba's fault. Turning people to stone is an unforgivable crime." Their team was already preparing to track him down. Sakin wished the boy to see the world and learn a lot. Kai sincerely thanked him for this opportunity. Bosshi smiled, then bowed to Ku, not as a boss but as a mentor. "If anything happens, let me know. And take care of yourself." Tears welled up in Ku's eyes. She promised him she would return. After that, Bosshi announced, "Our next step is to create a weapon. If Kuratoba attacks again, Kai must have something to defend himself with." Ku smiled. "Master is right." And Bosshi added, "You have already begun to establish a connection with the stone. It is time to create the perfect weapon." Kai's eyes lit up. He would be made the perfect weapon, just for him. Bosshi just smiled. His joy was expected, and then he frowned. "But you'll have to train for that." Kai already had 3 powers: reflection, turning rocks into diamonds, which was forbidden, and magnetic shoes. But he didn't have enough conductive energy. It was quickly depleted. The only way was to train, and Ku was happy to help. She immediately pushed him to the ground. Kai grumbled, "Bosshi's teachings are rough, but understandable." He realized that the reflection power was suitable for upper body strikes, but he couldn't activate it. And for left attacks, he used his boots. He barely had the strength to dodge. The boots threw him up and he fell back to the ground. The blow was too hard. Ku sighed. "I thought if he could manipulate diamonds he was a genius. But it turns out he's a rookie." However, that's what happens most often. Bosshi was worried that Kai might hit his head, but the boy assured him that everything was fine. And Ku smiled and noticed that there was a really strong connection between them. Kai apologized to Ku and asked her to repeat the exercise. She just smiled. They trained right in Boshi's house, on the back of a tired old turtle that could barely move. All this time, Kai studied with the master, fought with Ku, and read books. As they traveled, they stopped at sharp rocks. Ku and Bosshi taught Kai how to keep his balance, but he had a hard time doing it. On the way, they came across a giant skeleton of a creature. They had to climb over it. With effort, Kai climbed onto the bones, where Ku and Bosshi were already waiting. A breathtaking view of the sea opened up. They not only trained, but also prepared delicious dishes that Ku loved so much. Together they fed the turtle that served as their home. After that, Kai continued his practice with the rope. He was already able to grow crystals. Ku noticed that he was working harder than she thought. The guy didn't understand her. After all, the Federation was also hunting Kuratoba. He could just wait, doing nothing. But Kai objected. This was his fight, and he wouldn't let the Federation do it all alone. Especially since he had seen his age already fighting side by side with the enemy. "Maybe you're jealous of him?" Ku asked, and hesitated for a moment. Then, she accidentally punched Kai in the stomach. The guy flew away and shouted, "Are you serious?" Ku apologized. She didn't expect Kai to say that, because deep down, she wanted to be in his place. Gritting her teeth, she admitted, "I envy you a little." Kai didn't understand why she could envy him. In their world, the skill of an artisan was determined by its compatibility with the stone. And Tiger's Eye is an ordinary semi-precious stone, neither rare nor super strong, much weaker than a ruby or a diamond. This surprised Kai, and Ku looked at him grimly. She remembered how she had almost broken down as a child. She was ashamed of this stone. She thought her father would be disappointed if she didn't have the shiny stone. Once she even threw it away, and then Bosshi caught it. He looked closely at the Tiger's Eye, guessed whose stone it was, and smiled silently. "This stone is a symbol of wisdom and wealth," he said, and he added, "It leads to success for those who see the essence of things. Stones have their own charm. They are personal. This little stone was waiting for her in the dark until she found it. So she should cherish it, and Ku couldn't have it any other way. For her, her tiger was the greatest treasure. And even when it turned to stone, she remembered, its essence was in the stone. As long as the stone was whole, it could appear again. She never thought that someone who could tune into a diamond would work as hard as Kai. Her mother was a polisher and always repeated that stones have no hierarchy. They are all equal. Those who wear red simply love red. That doesn't make them better or worse. Everyone is different, but everyone is valuable. Ku fell silent. She looked at Kai for a long time, and she realized that she had envied him, even knowing his past. She felt ashamed. She apologized several times, bowed, and admitted he was sincere, and she appreciated that. You have nothing to worry about. Kai smiled. Ku even offered him a seat next to Dake Bosshi, but he repeated, everything is fine. Meanwhile, the master, standing on the balcony of his house, watched and smiled. Dake Bosshi happily announced, since the training is over, let's move on. Kai grabbed the railing. Can we rest for a minute? Their turtle house approached a huge chasm. Bowset looked at Dake Bosshi. Your turn. The master simply jumped down. Kai and Ku caught him in mid-flight, and Dake Bosshi activated the aquamarine. And then the entire house and the turtle found themselves in a transparent sphere of indigo-colored water. Falling into the water caused Kai to panic. It seemed like he was drowning. But an irritated Ku reminded him, you're breathing. And indeed, he could breathe. The boy finally regained control of himself. But then I noticed there were just clouds floating under the water. Ku explained, these are bubbles from the underwater city. Right now it's breathing. Kai didn't understand anything until he saw it himself. A view of a real underwater city opened up before him. It was built at the foot of a volcano, the place where the original stones first appeared. The mines of Anobai and the city in the blue depths looked like something out of a fairy tale. Rare minerals form near magma and volcanoes. The Anobai mines have modified this process to create stones that you won't find anywhere else. Ku glared at Kai. I'm your guard, so don't think you can run away from me. He gave up, and thought that it was really dangerous to run here. Lady Mimu ordered Ku to watch Kai especially carefully, and although she respected Dake Bosshi, she barely knew Kai yet. The master remembered that he knew a gunsmith here and suggested that they visit him first. Kai was worried. What about the money? But Dake Bosshi just smiled. Don't think about it. The boy looked at the teacher in shock. You're an adult, and you only have 10,000? He was shocked. Dake Bosshi is an important person. And then pieces of paper fell from the master's pockets. Kai picked one up, and Dake Bosshi shouted, Don't read this! But it was too late. It was a check on a stone. Alexandrite, blue zoisite, tourmaline, peridot. The amount was 5 million yen. Kai could not believe his eyes. He grabbed the teacher by the clothes and started shaking him. You don't know how to cook! You don't even control your finances! Dake Bosshi tried to calm the student. It's not that difficult. He promised to sell some stones, but Kai refused. No. Keep them for yourself. I will earn them myself. It is my debt. But Dake Bosshi stopped him. Put his hand on his shoulder. I won't allow it. You are my student. This is the duty of a teacher. The responsibility lies with me. Kai was amazed, and Ku felt proud. She had always known. Dake Bosshi was a true master. They found themselves in a gambling house. There, a waitress with a charming smile was delivering drinks to the tables. And Dake Bosshi was already playing. He exclaimed triumphantly, Even! Kai looked at him grimly. You are a complete idiot. Dake Bosshi asked Kai to wait a bit, because he was feeling a wave of success. Kai just sighed. You idiot. Meanwhile, the master was thinking about something. Everyone thought Dake Bosshi had come here just for fun. But Ku suddenly felt something was wrong with him. He was really in pain. She asked Kai about it. The pain could be physical, but also internal. Usually crafters gather stones in battle, but this path, although effective, was not the right one. And Kai should have understood that. He finally realized that the master was really suffering now. Kai saw Dake Bosshi drop his hands. He had lost everything, completely. And it seemed he hadn't even expected anything else. So what? You said yourself that you didn't expect anything from life, Kai grumbled. But Ku got angry. Be at least a little more tactful. The guy silently walked away. Where are you going? Ku shouted, but he didn't answer. He walked over to the players and politely apologized. With an innocent smile, Kai said that he had never played before, and wanted to try. Ku realized what was happening too late. One of the players thought the boy was the old loser's apprentice, and perhaps he had come for revenge. Your gray-haired teacher lost with a bang, and you'll suffer with him too. The man with the katana chuckled. Kai confirmed with a smile. Yes, he's not easy. Meanwhile, Dake Bosshi sat sadly on the sidelines, hearing these humiliations. Then that muscular player offered a deal. If you lose, you quit your teacher and work with me. I'll show you where the real money is. The drunken rich man promised profits. Kai agreed and placed his hand on the table. I agree, but only if you defeat me, Kai said calmly. The guy laughed and patted the boy on the back. Brave. The guy pretended to be naive and asked to play with indulgences. Ku watched warily, not believing that Kai could win, but he just winked. Just wait. Ku picked up the dice, hid them under a straw hat, and started the game. Some shouted, "Even!" Others shouted, "Odd!" The result was 3-1, even. The player's smile quickly disappeared. A large crowd gathered around. The game was spectacular, and strangely enough, Kai won again and again. The man couldn't stand it. How could this guy beat him? Finally, he grabbed his sword. You're setting me up. How could you win 50 times in a row? But Kai replied with a smile. You're the one who's cheating. I'm just using your tricks. They themselves set where the even number would be and where the odd number would be. They had special cubes filled with water and rolled them the way they needed. But Kai memorized the patterns on the wooden table. It was simple and brilliant. Ku didn't understand how he did it. I just watched carefully, he replied. The enraged opponent swung his sword, but Kai dodged in a leap. He activated the diamond's power and asked Ku not to interfere. I want to test my technique myself. He attacked with his foot. A million diamonds kick! Another one joined the fight. A bald one, similar to the first player's brother. Kai fought back, but was captured. But the one who thought he had already caught the boy suddenly saw Kai slip away and strike back over his shoulder, unexpectedly and accurately. It was hard to believe that Kai had learned to use magnetic boots and the power of a diamond so quickly. Enraged, the rival gritted his teeth, cursed, and threw an axe at the boy. Kai reached out, created a diamond shield. The axe ricocheted and hit between the opponent's legs. He almost fainted, and Kai slowly approached. You're still a long way from my teacher, the boy said coldly. He then caused the axe blade to become covered in sharp crystals that cut the attacker. He used the power of the red diamond and won. Smiling, Kai clenched his fist in joy. Dake Bosshi, breathing out happily, rushed to hug him. Although he was about to sell his stones, Kai stopped him. I've already decided everything. We've settled the score. Ku sighed in relief. She no longer considered Kai a problem. The boy jokingly told the master that he was like a child. Someone clapped behind him. The mysterious stranger under the hood smiled. Impressive. Now everything is falling into place. Somewhere where darkness reigns, Kai spent a whole year. He wondered why his diamond had begun to shrink. It wasn't fed, he suggested. The caretaker replied, We tried, but it kept throwing everything away. It must be something with its mind. He needs freedom and a meaning to life, they said. And they decided to let him go. The village headman once told Kai that as soon as he collected money, he would be able to buy back his family. Then the boy finally found himself in a place where there was no darkness, and he remembered his mother's words. She said, Stones are born in the deepest depths. They move slowly until they find people. Like people. At first they are just fragments, but over time they become something that shines. If one day you feel like you can't shine anymore, go and find a place where you can be yourself again. Kai then replied, It's an escape. But the mother only smiled. Every living creature is looking for a home. If you don't succeed the first time, don't give up. After work, he would come home with pennies and cry. It seemed to him that it would never be enough. But mother said, If you find your place, remember. One word will become your radiance. And then one day, Kai heard the children talking enthusiastically about the master with the red stone in his ear. That word was magical. His mother taught him, Be grateful, shine, and help those who helped you find yourself, so you yourself will become an irreplaceable diamond. And then the teacher found his way to the student, who had previously been called simply a stone. A stranger in a familiar cloak suddenly hugged Dake Bosshi. How glad I am to see you. It was Benito, an old friend and armorer. He hugged Kai so tightly that he almost suffocated. Benito's apprentice panicked. Is he dead already? Dake Bosshi explained to Ku. Benito used to be a doctor, and now he creates weapons for every artisan. She was surprised. From a doctor to a weapons master? Benito agreed to make weapons for them, but reminded them, I don't lend money. Dake Bosshi tried to get away with it. I have everything. Even a little more than necessary. Benito waved his hand. Okay, let's begin. Kai was a little startled. The man had stone horns growing from his head. He smiled. Haven't you seen the stone race yet? They are stone eaters, a race that lives by consuming stones. Their special feature is their horns. But most importantly, they can merge their consciousness with their combat weapons. Kai had no idea that some local craftsmen could telepathically communicate with weapons right in the shop. Together with Ku, they entered Benito's shop, and both of them were taken aback by the excitement. Everything was there. Wow, this is gorgeous, Kai exclaimed. He was struck by the colorful blades, which sparkled with unreal beauty. Benito proudly explained that he synthesizes the highest quality minerals using the power of the volcano, mixing nickel with Damascus steel, obsidian with silver. But he added, you don't get to choose. Every weapon here chooses its own owner, and Kai had to let it do that. Benito believed that he only had to prepare Kai as best he could for the encounter with the same weapon. To do this, he had to set up a connection between his stone and the weapon. He asked Kai to close his eyes. Imagine your power. It could be an image, a thing, or just a feeling. Kai nodded and fell into thought, and then everything around lit up. The stones began to pulse with crystals. This was the conversation between Kai's red diamond and the weapons in the workshop. Dake Bosshi watched in fascination. Kai saw the silhouette of a man with a flaming sword in front of him. But it wasn't him. It's Dake Bosshi, the boy thought, and Benito just winked. 100 points, boy. The store fell silent. No weapons responded. Benito said it had never happened before. Kai stood there stunned. How is that? Is there really no weapon that is compatible with him? And then a strange little creature appeared before them. It was Gong-chan, the aura seal. She is the best at tuning into the master's aura. Kai didn't hear her, but Benito explained. Suddenly, the creature spat out a dagger right at Kai's feet. The boy screamed and fell. Did it spit out a weapon? But the blade shone brightly. The entire floor lit up, and Benito leaned over in admiration. Interesting. What? This bullet chose me? Kai was confused. He thought it was disgusting. Benito just smiled. His student sighed. You're an idiot. It's not vomit. It's an artifact. Gong-chan simply swallowed the first-class weapon to pass it to Kai. His student asked Kai not to make a face. Dake Bosshi advised, just take it in your hands. Kai pulled the dagger out of its sheath, and it glowed again. It was light, comfortable. Ku asked, what is its concept? It's a shape memory alloy, Benito explained. Even if you bend it, it will return to its original shape. Kai was surprised. Why bend anything at all? He tried it, and indeed bent it with ease. He was offended. They gave me garbage. Benito leaned forward. There is no stone that everyone wants. There is no thing that is useless. It all depends on the owner. Gong-chan's teacher didn't like fighting, so he created weapons for defense and escape. But each of his works is unique. This is the weapon that chose you, so try it, he said, his voice warm. Kai agreed, took the dagger, and asked Ku to help test it. Kurigan, the second student, said to Dake Bosshi, Kai is a cool guy. The master just smiled. While the students practiced, the teachers had their own conversation. Benito immediately realized that Dake Bosshi had come here for more than just weapons. And the master admitted that he had nothing to hide from his old friend. But their conversation was interrupted by Kai's piercing scream. He had figured out how to use a dagger. Everyone jumped in surprise. They headed to Benito's training ground, where the stone golem and Gong-chan were already waiting. Benito's student wanted to make sure that everything was okay with Kai. But Kai smiled. Let me just try. Remember, the stone obeys the will of the master. Imagine a blade, clean and sharper than anything in the world, said Ku. Dake Bosshi was confident in him but warned, just don't overwork yourself. Kai concentrated, drew his dagger and assumed a fighting stance. He remembered how he had strengthened Dake Bosshi's sword with a diamond, and did the same with the dagger. Strengthening it, Kai jumped up and struck at the target. The stone golem crumbled like butter under a blade. Kai activated the red flash skill. As the fragments fell, Benito confirmed. Thanks to the memorable metal, Kai could turn the blade into a diamond again and again. Benito's student was amazed. Ku and Dake Bosshi were jumping for joy. Kai had succeeded. Ku threw herself at Kai with hugs. The guy begged her to stop, and Dake Bosshi shouted, You're cool! Ku frowned, and I want to hug the master. Benito couldn't help himself either. Everyone hugged him. At night, when everyone is asleep, Benito closes the door and says, "They grow faster than we think." Ike Bosshi takes off his outerwear. Benito's face turns serious. "This is no time for sentimentality. What happened to your body, Ike Bosshi?" He sees crystalline patterns all over his friend's torso. "You have to explain," Benito demands. Ike Bosshi tells how he is tormented by the same terrible dream. The moment when something sharp pierces him. He wakes up in a cold sweat. His throat is dry, so Kai wakes up and goes to the kitchen to get some water. But he notices that the light in Ike Bosshi and Benito's room is still on. He comes closer and hears a muffled but tense conversation. "Why are they arguing?" thought Kai. The guy quietly peeks through the keyhole, and he sees Ike Bosshi's body is covered with an incomprehensible crystalline pattern. Benito asks why he didn't contact the Federation's medical department. Ike Bosshi says, "There were no symptoms. But if they had found out, they would have declared me unfit. The Federation would definitely want pigeon blood back," he adds. Kai is shocked. "It's the same pigeon blood." Benito sighs. "It all started with the three of us, me, Kurotobe, and Ike Bosshi. They conducted experiments. They took orphans and inserted stones into their bodies, trying to create the perfect human being." Kai was shocked. His hands trembled and his eyes filled with terror. He remembered the teacher's smile. "And I didn't understand how he could live like this with this horror inside." Ike Bosshi suspected that he himself was the product of a failed experiment. The people who went through it experienced hell. But the irony is that it was thanks to the blood of the pigeon that the antimonite Kurotobe inserted did not completely absorb him. The alchemical reaction was suppressed. Kai wanted to hear Benito's opinion. Benito confirmed, "Yes, it is possible. After all, my cinnabar is the stone of immortality. Their ability allowed them to analyze diseases." For Benito, this was the first case of treating petrification. Every detail had to be analyzed. To make matters worse, Benito had to literally crawl into Ike Bosshi's body. The treatment was a living hell. He immediately warned that if something went wrong, Ike Bosshi could die. The master only smiled. Perhaps this was the key to curing Kai's legs. Ike Bosshi had no family, and Kai had someone to turn to. That was why the boy was more important than him. Even if Benito healed his leg, Ike Bosshi would have no regrets if he died. He was ready. But at that moment the door burst open. An angry Kai burst into the room. He rushed at Ike Bosshi and grabbed him by the clothes. He didn't understand why he was behaving so foolishly. He knocked the teacher to the floor and pinned him against the wall, hitting him with his fists. Kai begged him to imagine how he had dreamed all this. But Ike Bosshi did not understand what exactly he meant. Kai asked why he hadn't said anything about the condition of his body. Ike Bosshi apologized, saying he didn't want to bother him. But Kai didn't know how to explain it. He thought the teacher was silent because he considered him a child. Or maybe it was because of the stone disease. Maybe Ike Bosshi was just too protective of him. The master exclaimed that it was not so, and that it was not his intention. But Kai could not understand what was driving him then. He realized that he was still weak. But one day he wanted to become equal to his teacher. Ike Bosshi admitted that Kai had walked a difficult, scary path. And the boy was happy. As if a stone had fallen from his soul. He had never told Ike Bosshi anything about himself. And the master didn't know how he could possibly talk about his pain. After all, he had to remain a teacher. Kai exclaimed that he didn't understand why he couldn't just tell the truth. Teachers were people too. He should have shared his pain. But Ike Bosshi thought that would only make Kai worry. Kai shouted even louder. He asked them not to hide behind it. He tried to ask how the teacher was feeling. But Ike Bosshi didn't see the point. He didn't think it would make any difference. But Kai knew that would change everything. Because he wouldn't want to be around a teacher who was dying. And Ike Bosshi couldn't find the words to answer. The master could die for what was important to him. But he had no right to blame it on Kai. He shouted, "Everything is wrong, you misunderstood me." Kai wanted to understand what exactly Ike Bosshi meant. But, after all, he had already said it himself. And he shouted, "Of course I don't want to die." He immediately realized that he had said too much. He covered his mouth with his hand. Kai looked at him with warmth and a slight smile, and he replied, "That was enough. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Then he bowed to the teacher and apologized for the noise. Ike Bosshi wanted to say something, but Kai beat him to it. If the master was ready to talk about his body, he could discuss it with Kuo tomorrow. And if not, that's okay too. To change the subject, he apologized and asked where the kitchen was. Benito explained that it was to the right of the store entrance. As Kai was leaving, he apologized for being childish. Ike Bosshi clenched his fists. Kai left, slamming the door. Dake Bosshi threw back his head and put his hand to his forehead, pity welling up in him. Someone said quietly, "Kai is a true knight." But the thought only added to the master's sadness. Kai walked down the long corridor. Tears glistened in his eyes. He wiped them away, remembering Dake Bosshi's words. If he was the teacher, he had something to give. Because the teacher felt that he had received something from Kai. They were more than student and mentor. For a moment, Kai paused, staring in surprise at the figure in front of him. The figure stuck out its tongue and poked a finger at him. Kai seemed more like a partner than a student, but suddenly he found himself on his knees before a mysterious figure. Dake Bosshi thought aloud that the stronger Kai became, the more he could rely on him. He was even going to apologize tomorrow, but suddenly he heard a strange noise. At the same time, Kai's body began to be covered in crystals. The student and teacher were having a conversation, not noticing that they were already being watched. The hero stepped out into the hallway. Kuo opened the door, hesitating whether to pretend she hadn't heard or intervene. He headed for the restroom, holding back tears. Suddenly, the girl called him a pathetic child with a cold look. A stranger stood before him. The hero silently clutched his throat, and she pointed at him with a finger that was burning with fire. Kai felt his lower body go numb. Looking down, he saw his legs begin to turn to crystal. The girl raised the lamp and said that he was the main target among all the kurat seeds. She praised Kai for the courage with which he swallowed it. Kai suddenly realized that this was Kurata's friend. But he could no longer move. His body was bound by crystals. Tobias's accomplice was surprised when Kai managed to reach out and break the lantern that the enemy was holding. In his mind, he pleaded for help. Kuo opened the door and asked Kai what the noise was, but her face changed dramatically when she saw the scene. Kuo grabbed a whip and rushed at the girl, but the stranger ordered her to move away and released a flock of toothy bats. Kuo tried to resist, driving away the creatures and raging with powerlessness. Tobias's partner smiled and told the red diamond that it was time to go. As soon as she got close to Kai, Benito's student instantly attacked. She hit the stranger, demanding an explanation, but she deftly jumped back and dodged the blow with the mop. The enemy disappeared from sight again, but Kuo managed to warn them. She was on top of them. The student didn't even have time to raise his head when the stranger grabbed him and slammed him to the floor. James, recognizing Vlad, was terrified and begged him to stop. He was still a child. But the clawed hand had already swung. The girl managed to save Kurgan from a fatal blow. Her sword cut through the enemy's claws, but she thought that her time had come. She didn't win the prize, but that didn't matter now. Nito didn't understand how she had broken through the barrier, and begged her to stop. The girl was already running away, and Dake Bosshi's sword fell to the floor with a clang. When everyone looked at Kai, they were shocked. They couldn't believe their eyes. Before them stood a boy, completely petrified, like the other victims. The teacher turned to Kuo, and she reacted instantly. Bursting into flames, he lost control of himself and sent an urgent message. At this time, the stranger tried to escape on the dragon, but she didn't calculate. A pillar of fire tried to knock her out of the sky. She only whistled. A large shark appeared in Dake Bosshi's path, but he struck it with a swing and ordered it to get away. The sword was engulfed in bright flames, and the monster was consumed by a burning, blazing fire element. She was amazed. The bow and arrow had evaporated all the water, but she expected nothing less from Golubka. She regretted not being able to capture the red diamond, and already regretted laughing at Kuratobai. Her dragon flew up sharply. It was enough that she managed to do the minimum. She had almost no strength left, and the sword slipped from her hands. Sighing, she fell to her knees. She tried with all her might to stay on her feet, but she still fell. She couldn't understand how the enemies had found out about this place. Somehow they did break through the defense. She grabbed his clothes and was horrified. What was in the boy's body could serve. He slammed his fist on the ground in anger. The image of a smiling Kai flashed before his eyes, and Dake Bosshi exploded with rage. Flames engulfed everything around him. Meanwhile, at the top of the mountain, the man lay on the edge of the abyss, remembering Yukari's words. She would manage on her own. He decided not to come any closer so as not to expose himself, and stayed to wait for Yukari at the agreed-upon location. Suddenly, a large dragon appeared from the edge of the abyss. Furutoba stood up and welcomed Yukari back. He asked where their boyfriend with the red diamond was, but the girl looked away. Kuratobai understood everything and chuckled. A broccoli grabbed his face, not understanding why she did it. Yukari already knew he would laugh now. Kuratobai decided to check the connection. They reported that the Alkari had broken through the barrier and turned the boy into stone, but they didn't have time to take him away. The other end replied that that was enough. This result was a devastating blow to the Golubka clan. All they needed from the guy with the red diamond was for him to become an absolute raw crystal. Kuragain turned to Ike Bosshi. The artist apologized for not being able to capture the enemy and asked about Kuo and Benito. They were now watching over Kai. But Kuragain looked angry and anxious. Ike Bosshi bowed to the boy, sincerely regretting having dragged him into such danger. He was ashamed. But he had something else to say, to thank him for fighting for everyone. He apologized to Kuragain and asked him to step back, although he did not understand why. Ike Bosshi made a seal on his palm and said he wanted to know something. When the seal was activated, it turned out that the entire store was under a protective shell. The man wondered how the enemies had managed to break through it all. Ike Bosshi explained that the barrier had been opened precisely and carefully. The defense consisted of 5,000 minerals, and could only be broken by knowing the exact combination. Benito returned to the shop before Ike Bosshi raised the barrier. It definitely wasn't him. Suspicion fell on Kuo. But Ike Bosshi didn't even want to think about it. Kuragain noticed his condition, but he just smiled and said that he was fine. He apologized for the wait and invited me inside. When the door opened, Kuo stood before him, immediately calling out to the teacher. Together with Kuragain, they went upstairs. The girl apologized for running away. Tears welled up in her eyes. She was supposed to protect Kai, but even when he was in front of her, she couldn't do anything. She cried and repeated her apology. But Ike Bosshi grabbed her by the shoulders and asked her to listen. Ike Bosshi believed that everything that happened was his fault. Kuo tried to argue, but he interrupted her and asked her to listen. Now was not the time to look for the culprit. She should only be thinking about what to do next. Kuragain looked at the master intently, while Kuo wiped away her tears and tried to calm herself. She said that the captain of the 1st and 2nd divisions was already on his way, and she wanted to join the rescue party. She asked permission to leave Kai in Ike Bosshi's care, and he agreed. After the conversation, Ike Bosshi approached the petrified student who was being guarded by Benito. Overcoming all his feelings, he silently walked past Kai. No one could believe how this was even possible. Nito and Ike Bosshi just stared at him in silence. Nito didn't understand how Ike Bosshi could remain so calm, and why everything fell on his shoulders. It seemed to him that he was the one who should have saved Kai. He had been so close, even before Kai had turned to stone. But now it all seemed pointless. He wished he had come sooner. After all, Kai was his first real client. He was terrified. He had allowed him to die so easily. Ike Bosshi calmed Kuragain down, took off his outer clothing, and said that Kai was still alive. Therefore, they must do everything possible to save him. All the feelings that tore at them, guilt, regret, pain, meant one thing. He was still alive. Kuo decided that everything else could wait. Benito turned to Ike Bosshi, wanting to say something about Kai. The master listened attentively to his stony voice. The words had little power, but Benito could feel the pulse and life in the boy. Ike Bosshi was right. Kai was still alive. Benito promised to do everything he could to find a way to save him. At this, Ike Bosshi stepped back a little and leaned on the railing, agreeing with Benito. He apologized to Benito and asked to give him a stone similar to the one Kai had. But Benito delayed his answer. Kuragain hurried to fulfill the teacher's request and ran to another room. Meanwhile, Lenito wanted to ask about Ike Bosshi's plans. He intended to hand Kai over to the Federation, but first wanted to attach a ruby transmitter to him. Nito wasn't sure if the master would really hand the boy over to the Federation. But Ike Bosshi replied that he trusted Numea and shared Benito's feelings. The result of this was right in front of them. For Kusake, Ike Bosshi didn't want to let another loss happen. The Federation was Kai's safest place at the moment. Saying this, Ike Bosshi used his power on the debris that Kuragain had brought. The stone sand cracked and turned into an earring. Nito understood that Ike Bosshi wanted to track Kai down. The ruby earring would work, even without the stone inside. The earring was attached to Kai's ear, and the master said everything was ready. At that moment, the door opened, and Kuo apologized for the delay. Her tiger was acting strangely. He was looking anxiously in a certain direction. There was a knock on the door, demanding that it be opened immediately. Voices could be heard from behind the door. Kuo didn't expect this, but she explained. This place is not under the control of the Federation, so the guards will take Kai under their protection. When she opened the door, the person in front of her decided that she was from the Federation. The girl introduced herself as an employee of the Audit Bureau of the 1st Department of the Eastern Division. She introduced the enemy guards. They were acting on direct orders from Ovamarin of the 12 Stone Pillars. The boy with the red diamond was to leave with them immediately. and teacher Ike Bosshi would be taken into custody. Both Kuragain and Kuo were shocked. Kuo was hurt by this, but Ike Bosshi only quietly acknowledged that such a thing could really happen. Ike Bosshi warned Benito that they were just clients to him. Don't pay attention to their words. Benito understood him. Kuo stated that she personally wants to arrest Ike Bosshi. The master approached his petrified student, touched his hand, and asked him to wait a little longer. It was a farewell. Someone ran upstairs to wake Ike Bosshi, calling him loudly. He lowered his eyes and apologized for putting her in an awkward position. But Kuo apologized too. His hands were tied with rope. They informed him that he would be handed over to Lord Susumi, the head of the ANMI intelligence. When the squad led Ike Bosshi away, Kuragain could not stand it and screamed. He reminded them that they had not yet paid for the goods. Ike Bosshi smiled sadly and advised them to return. In the meantime, they would continue working on the perfect weapon, and he promised that this weapon would be so cool that no amount of savings would be enough to buy it. Supporting his student, he said he would wait for their return. In the meantime, they would improve Kai's weapon. He believed, no, he was certain, that they would come back to him. At Samet's estate, a soldier informed his lord that he had exceeded his lunchtime by 30 seconds. The lord tapped his chopsticks on his plate and agreed. Meanwhile, Ike Bosshi was thinking about how to get out as quickly as possible and get Kai back. But without violence. His thoughts were about Aquamarine from the Apostles. The Morin was a man named Susumi. Dissatisfied, he poured the remaining stones into his mouth and asked not to disturb him during the quality inspection. Ike Bosshi didn't understand why he, of all people, had to do this. But he had no choice. He had to act. They were sent to the water chamber. The Federation girl was told to stay in Quogri. She thought of Ike Bosshi with sadness and hoped that everything was fine with him. The 12 Pillars were an elite group of artisans chosen by the Federation, but each had their own level of trust in it. She thought Mr. Susumi and Ike Bosshi didn't get along. Ike Bosshi's thoughts turned to Susumi and Froud. He knew that Froud hated the Federation, so perhaps he could help him escape. Susumi always had a grudge against him. To be honest, Ike Bosshi didn't want to bow, but this time he had no choice. The escort knocked on the door and they entered. Lord Susumi was told that a man transferred from the Eastern Division had arrived, but the man shouted from the threshold and attacked Ike Bosshi. The master took the blow of the water and tried to hold back the wave. The wave was so strong that it threw Ike Bosshi backwards. His back hit the wall with a loud thud. Susumi said with disdain that he hoped to never see his face again. He was Aquamarine among the 12 Pillars and the head of the Donny Mine Chamber. Ike Bosshi frowned and sarcastically noted that he had no doubts about the hospitality. With these words, he tore several slabs from the floor, which burst into bright flames. The escort was surprised. The shackles should have restrained his strength. But the Lord ordered the weapon to be lowered. It was not even suitable for summoning a dog. Ike Bosshi decided to attack Susumi and threw burning plates at him. Susumi easily repelled the water attacks and smiled, thinking his opponent had lost control. But suddenly his face contorted. Several fiery slabs nevertheless pierced the defense and hit him in the leg. Ike Bosshi thought that Susumi had risen so high that he could no longer see the obvious. Susumi was annoyed by the master's arrogant attitude. Ike Bosshi was surprised when the wave of the attack cut the rope on his arm. Susumi became even angrier and ordered him to leave. Susumi's snapping of his fingers sounded like a warning. If Ike Bosshi could talk to such scoundrels, perhaps he would listen to him. But the master replied that he had become too intelligent for that. Susumi swung his fist, but Ike Bosshi dodged and returned the blow. He aimed to knock the giant off his feet, but the Lord only grabbed him by the leg and slammed him to the ground. Ike Bosshi was lying on the floor. The Lord approached him and called him an indecisive coward. He stepped on his back, accused him of fleeing the Federation and renouncing his status as a pillar. He reprimanded Ike Bosshi for taking a problematic student, destroying half the city because of him, and then continuing his journey without permission. Susumi wanted to strike again, but the master dodged and replied, he really couldn't protect his student. The Lord leaned towards him, thinking that he was so pitiful that he was about to cry, but a faint smile appeared on Ike Bosshi's face. Humiliated, he was ready to die, but not break. He swung his leg at the Lord, but the Lord dodged and shouted that in that case he should go to hell. Then he kicked Ike Bosshi in the shoulder. Seeing a strange stone texture on his shoulder, the master seized the moment to grab the Lord and fall with him. He was truly ready to die, but he couldn't afford it now. And with those words, he pushed Susumi to the floor. He grabbed his head and admitted that Ike Bosshi had hit him well. The master called him a stone eater. He said that the one who turned his student into stone was named Yukari. a girl with black horns who was also a devourer. Susumi was hesitant at first, but Dake Bosshi was convinced. There was no doubt. He showed a picture of the same girl as evidence. Susumi confirmed. Her name was Yukari. She had been wanted since childhood, befriended stone beasts, stole, and even killed. A disgrace to their people. He called Dake Bosshi an inventive freak. The master apologized, noting that he had no other choice. Dake Bosshi declared that he was ready to do anything to save his student. He was willing to help in her capture if the Lord agreed to help him. Susumi remembered the significance of the red diamond and how Dake Bosshi had refused to protect Mimli. Such a mistake was inevitable, and arresting him for failing to protect a student was unnecessary. Susumi took a drag on his pipe and smiled as the former pillar bowed before him. It was worth extending a helping hand. Dake Bosshi bowed and thanked Lord Susumi. He grimaced. The gratitude sounded insincere, and ordered it to be repeated. Dake Bosshi repeated it, albeit with irritation. Susumi remembered their first meeting. Back then, he was a carefree craftsman without stubbornness or conviction. His light laughter seemed appropriate then. And he was also a coward who fled at the first threat. And only now did Susumi finally see something real in him that he could cling to. Meanwhile, someone was waiting in the room. Suddenly there was a knock. Someone asked permission to enter. It was a girl. She greeted the teacher, that is, the head of the first department, and, touching herself, apologized for not having coped with her duty. The teacher gently stroked the confused girl's head and said with a smile that her safety was above all else. Kuo couldn't stand it anymore. She cried and hugged her mentor tightly. When the hero woke up, there was only emptiness and darkness before his eyes. Slowly getting up, he tried to understand where he was. Kuo and Dake Bosshi clicked, but there was no one around. A huge shadow lurked in the depths of his mind, something ancient that still slept within him. He looked at his bare feet and tried to remember. Had he recently had a fight with someone? Or with the elixir? He raised his hands and remembered how he had been turned to stone. But if so, why can he still move? It seemed that he had entered a completely different world. And then a stranger's voice sounded from behind. They were in Orvan, a place where the souls of stones gather. The hero turned around in surprise and saw a red-haired man with a blindfold. He trembled as he looked at him, and the stranger said with a smile that he had no name, but had come to guide Kai. Kai was surprised that the stranger knew his name. But the stranger replied that he knew everything about him. He told me that after being turned to stone, Kai's soul ended up here, in Orvan. That's why he can move freely. Kai was shocked. His left leg was intact. Realizing this, he looked around. The stranger hovered in midair and asked what had happened. Kai figured that if he was the only one here, then no one else was petrified, and it seemed he was right. He spat on the ground with relief, but the stranger pointed out that this was not the place he should be going. He ended up here only because of his high compatibility with Orvan. But even so, the stranger warned that his guiding power was still weak, and side effects were possible. Kai was surprised and asked again. The leading force? He confirmed. All artisans use Orvan when they use the power of the conductor. With these words, he heated the ore and turned it into a diamond. The hero was stunned. It was the same force, leading, like trumpet. The energy flowing through this pipe was Orvan's power. Before him, something like a giant, shining waterfall surged. Kai tried to gather himself, shaking his head, trying not to lose his train of thought. But the stranger grabbed his hand and said he could show him an even more beautiful place. There was also an opal rainbow, a field of sphalerite flowers, and a labradorite sky. But Kai was confused and asked to wait a moment. He apologized and said he had to go back. He asked for directions to the exit, but the stranger replied, "There's no way out of here." Kai clarified whether he was talking about returning to human form, but that was impossible. Silently turning away, he ran in the opposite direction. The stranger asked where he was going and offered to show him what he wanted, but Kai thanked him and refused. He decided to find a way out himself. The stranger puffed out his cheeks with resentment, and suddenly a huge stone wall grew in front of Kai. The angry guide asked why Kai was leaving him. He had been waiting for this meeting for so long and wanted to talk to the hero again. But Kai exclaimed that he could not stay, for time was short. Then the stranger used an invisible force and ordered him to be quiet and sit down. To distract Kai, he showed him his favorite stones. The hero was surprised and thought that maybe he should stay here a little longer. The stranger asked which diamond the hero liked and recommended one. He said it definitely suited him. Kai took it in his hands, and a light mist enveloped everything around. The stranger fell onto something soft and smiled. He had made a Mesolithic mattress by reducing the hardness and size of the crystals. Kai found it amazing, though it stung a little. He suggested that Kai get some sleep, and he thought for a moment. Lying on a soft mattress, the hero looked at the sleeping guide and got up. But as soon as he tried to run away, the guide called to him, and Kai jumped up in fright. The guide asked in surprise why the hero was so eager to return and what would change if he did. Even if a weakling like him returns, his surroundings will still protect him. And in the end, Kai only causes problems. He should consider that perhaps it was the people who were wrong. Kai lowered his head. He didn't deny that it could have been that way, but it would have been irresponsible to admit it and give up. At the same moment, a crystal wall grew again behind him. Without hesitation, he grabbed the ledges and began to climb up. The guide rushed after him. He was not going to let Kai go so easily. He promised to give him everything he wanted, and that he would always be safe here. But Kai apologized. He had unfinished business. The guide reminded him that there was no way out of here. Kai replied that it was just his opinion. He tried to stop him once again, saying he could reunite him with his family. Kai was so surprised that his foot slipped off the ledge. A piece of rock crumbled, and the hero fell to the lower step. The guide reminded him again. This place is the home of stone souls, and he could bring his relatives here. Here everyone could live happily, have fun. But Kai was determined. He would cure them himself. The guide still didn't understand why he wanted to leave so badly. After all, Kai could just wait for someone else to cure him. But the hero was not going to wait. He had to leave as quickly as possible, and as far as possible. He should have returned earlier, before anything happened, Kai thought. If he had known that it would be easier for the teacher to imagine that he would never return, everything could have been different. If he had simply accepted defeat, it would be easier if no one cared. As he climbed the next ledge, Kai heard a voice telling him to stop. He squinted at a sudden bright flash. A huge, glowing stone dragon appeared before him. The hero stared in surprise, and the dragon said that he had achieved this form through the help of others. He had the right to be tested. But Kai did not understand what the mysterious test would consist of. The serious dragon said that there would be a test, and if he passed it, perhaps he would be able to return. But he himself denied that return was impossible. Kai was shocked, and did not understand who was arranging these tests. If it passes the test, the guiding force will become extremely powerful. And if not, the dragon will devour his soul right here and now. The stranger tried to stop the dragon, saying that Kai had just arrived and was still confused. But the hero was determined, which surprised the blindfolded guide. The dragon only said, "Great!" and the ground beneath Kai's feet began to crack violently. The stone wall began to collapse, and the hero flew down with a scream. The dragon finally said that there would be only one test, and it will happen precisely in these mountains of Orvan. Kai had to find the most valuable stone among the pile of others on his own and bring it to the dragon. Meanwhile, in the underwater castle, the captains were informed about the events. One of them reported that the enemies had broken through the orb barrier. Ashami assumed that they had extremely powerful technology. If such a technique really exists, they're very unlucky. They probably overheard the correct combination for the barrier. Suddenly, a crystal flashed on Kuo's belt, and Saken asked what it was. The girl explained that it was an amulet from Lady Mumu. But Saken had suspicions. He thought the emblem had fallen off her cloak and asked her not to move. He took one of Kuo's crystals, clicked it, and turned to Captain Cheeto. He threw the crystal in his direction and asked him to be careful. There might be a stinking ladybug there. The captain, as if going mad, smashed the crystal and shouted that he hated insects. Getas begged to be taken away. Kuo looked at the teacher, and Saken only smiled and asked not to reveal it. At that moment, a soldier approached them. Lord Susumi wanted to see them. They were led down the corridor and invited to the right room. Saken and Kuo came in. Dake Bosshi and Susumi were there. Kuo had never seen Lord Susumi before, so she kept her eyes on him the whole time. Saken reported that the captain of the Eastern Division Inspection Bureau had arrived. Dake Bosshi, meanwhile, was glad that Kuo had recovered. The girl greeted the teacher warmly. She ran to him with tears in her eyes and exclaimed how glad she was that he was safe. Dake Bosshi smiled and apologized for breaking his promise. He looked at his hands and was surprised to see that they were not shackled. Susumi said that he needed to clarify a few things first. He wanted to know from Saken and Kuo what role they had played in this situation, and what they planned to do with Dake Bosshi and Kuritobai. Dake Bosshi was not only a pillar of stone, he was also the lord of these mines. The lord wanted to capture Kuritobai and his accomplice, the stone devourer Yukari. He was not interested in the red diamond. Dake Bosshi remained here as a source of information. Kai's teacher Dake Bosshi wanted to track down Kuratobi to save Kai. But now that Kuratobi is safe, he doesn't need anything else. The Federation demanded that Kai and Dake Bosshi be protected. But if the master stays here, they will be separated. Kuo looked at Saken anxiously, waiting for an answer. He replied, "The Federation has two goals: to arrest Kuratobi for the crimes he committed, and to return the petrified people to their normal state. If Lord Susumi doesn't mind, he will entrust Dake Bosshi to them. As for Kai, they might be attacked again during their journey." So Saken thought it would be best to leave him here. The answer surprised both Kuo and Dake Bosshi, and so it was decided. Lord Susumi decreed that Dake Bosshi and his apprentice would remain with him, and he ordered the boys to find Kuratobi and give him a good beating. "It will be easier that way. Lord Susumi asked me to follow him." Kuo looked around. The crystal was no longer with her. Dake Bosshi looked at Saken, trying to make sure of his confidence. Saken smiled and said that he had just given a good excuse. Dake Bosshi smiled at Kuo and admitted that her teacher was really cool. Kuo was delighted and agreed. But then she confessed to the master that she had not expected this from Susumi at all. He seemed scary to her. Dake Bosshi asked her to just watch to understand better. But Kuo still didn't understand what he meant. When Lord Susumi opened the door, he was immediately surrounded by people with requests. Some wanted to see the artificial stone, others a prototype. Some asked for opinions on prices, and children simply called to play. He couldn't stand it and shouted, demanding silence. He had guests, so he would only accept the most important matters. Then he ordered them to line up by status, from the smallest to the largest. He approached the children individually, promised them 5 minutes, and they happily agreed. Kuo noted that the Lord, despite his cold appearance, was incredibly popular. She thought the reason was his determination and responsibility in controlling the Stone Eaters. Everyone around him felt it. After all, it was Lord Susumi who created their present. Dake Bosshi couldn't believe his eyes. The Lord apologized for the delay and gestured for him to move on. A giant underwater dome with completely transparent walls opened up before them. Kuo was mesmerized by this underwater world. Susumi headed inside and called Uno. It seemed that they were at the top of the mine, so both Dake Bosshi and Kuo believed. The girl, who was sitting in the other room, saw the Lord and realized that he had guests. Susumi scolded Uno, saying she was not doing her duty. At first she didn't believe him, but then she admitted her guilt. She admitted that she had a feeling that she would see the great Orvan miracle today. But she was surprised that the Lord had brought people from the Federation here. Susumi adjusted her clothes and reminded her that he had asked her not to wear such revealing clothes. Kuo thought he was a true gentleman. Dake Bosshi thought he was naive about such things. He ordered Uno to activate the water vision, but she didn't know where to look. Kuo whispered to Dake Bosshi what it was. Susumi decided it would be easier to just show him. He ordered the water supply system to be prepared. Uno smiled and announced that everything was ready. Susumi formed a seal, concentrated, and the stone on his hand flashed with a bright light. He used the power of aquamarine and obsidian to create something like a dome for the entire city. When he opened his eyes, he activated the water vision technique. All the water in the sea seemed to gather into a giant ball and rise into the air. A true turquoise miracle was unfolding before the hero. This creation belonged to Aquamarine Susumi. He dispersed the mass of water with his monstrous guiding force. The flow of energy rose all the way to the sky. The ball was visible from anywhere on the continent. Uno activated her obsidian spirit eye to find the mark. It was the water vision, but Kuo still didn't understand what mark Dake Bosshi was referring to. It turned out that there was a drop of water left on Yukari's body from Orwan. That was the mark. Kuo was shocked that they were looking for such a small detail. With such an eye, one can find even a grain of sand in the desert. Uno is the secretary of the Lord of Mines, an obsidian gem who possesses the ability to search for guiding forces. At that moment, Yukari was sitting on the stone dragon. Drops of water began to gather from all sides. One fell on her face, and Uno exclaimed that she had found them. Yukari was at 43 degrees north latitude and 125 degrees west longitude. The soldier handed the map to the Lord, who immediately thanked him. This point was the dragon's neck base. The A&M mines were located in its torso, and it looked as if the enemy had already crossed the first 2 peaks of the dorsal fin ridge. Saken studied the map carefully. This was the Great Dragon's Ridge, the largest nest of stone beasts on the continent. It all seemed logical, a perfect place for an Alkari base. Saken asked Dake Bosshi when they should leave. He replied that the movement would leave tomorrow morning. Kuo was surprised that they were leaving tomorrow. If Yukari's only goal was to petrify Kai, she could run away again. They had to hurry. Saken understood this and promised to prepare the flying dragon immediately. Dake Bosshi thanked him. Kuo said that he should contact Captain Uin, and Saken agreed. Suddenly, Uno appeared, pounced on Dake Bosshi, and exclaimed that she hadn't seen him in a long time. Dake Bosshi smiled and noted that she was as energetic as ever. Uno replied that there was no problem with that. She called him Akarin and hinted that something was wrong with his body again. It was probably because of his habit of hoarding everything. Susumi just glanced at him suspiciously. Uno couldn't help but say that everything was fine. But Lord Susumi continued to look at him with the same sternness. She turned away and confessed she could never understand him. Then she turned to Susumi and asked her to look after Kai until tomorrow. It seemed that Dake Bosshi was going to fight alone, but he denied it. He was talking about Kai's safety, his position, and Susumi's influence. He also mentioned that he had noticed some strange behavior from Mumu. Although he didn't know how corrupt the Federation was now, she was one of the 12 pillars. Mumu fainted a little, but Saken gave Dake Bosshi a message. Lady Mumu was calling him. Susumi went to her alone, but Dake Bosshi wanted to go with him. The Lord refused, saying he would only be a hindrance. Irritated, Dake Bosshi stopped. Susumi waved his hand and said that his fake naivety was like a tiger pretending to be a cat. It gave him goosebumps. He suggested that Dake Bosshi rest and leave the matter to him. A moved Uno offered to show him the room. Dake Bosshi thought that it was really difficult to understand Susumi. In his room, he lay down on the bed, stared at the ceiling, and thought. Night had already fallen outside. He thought that this place was truly beautiful. The sea, the power of Susumi, everything guaranteed safety. Even stone beasts would not penetrate here. Kuo approached Shurai and asked him to open the door. He frowned at first, but gave her the code to the lock. She chased away the captain guarding Kai and entered. Dake Bosshi immediately recognized the code: copper, lead, and silver. He picked up the seal, the door opened, and before him was the petrified Kai. He promised the student that they would extract information about the treatment from Kuratobai, and asked him to wait a little. Not to be afraid, even if he had to endure it. On the night when Kai got angry with him, Dake Bosshi thought a lot, and he realized the happiness he wanted was only possible when he disappeared from this world. But now everything has changed. With these words, he touched the petrified hand of his student. He smiled. He just wanted to travel with Kai again, and that's why he will live, just to be by his side. Suddenly, Kai's hand shone with a blinding light, and Dake Bosshi froze. At that moment, the captains ran into the room, trying to understand what had happened. Dake Bosshi said that everything was fine. One of the captains asked what had happened, but the master himself was surprised and had no answer. He looked at his hand, as if to make sure that everything was really okay. His gaze never left Kai. He thought about that bright flash of life. The Federation decided to split into groups. One of the masked captains reported that an emergency flying dragon was approaching. Kuo and Saken would accompany Dake Bosshi, while the rest would stay to guard Kai. But Saken wanted to call in more forces to destroy Kuratobai. The masked captain categorically denied it. Lady Mumu was in a terrible mood right now. Dake Bosshi agreed. It was not worth burdening Saken and Kuo. Kuo didn't understand anything, and got angry. She said she wanted to save Kai no less than he did. Dake Bosshi thanked her with a smile. Susumi called Dake Bosshi, and the master looked around. The Lord threw him a small ball and told him to use it if Kuratobai tried to escape. Dake Bosshi nodded and thanked him. The master flew up on a stone dragon and shouted to the Lord that he trusted Kai to him. Saken, Kuo, and Dake Bosshi set off. Saken said it was only half an hour to the Dragon Ridge, and the master agreed. If they kept up the pace, they would arrive soon. Their dragon almost collided with a giant stone shark on which the Alkari girl was sitting. She smiled and assumed that they were looking for someone. Kobe was there too. He told Golubka that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and he thought that Dake Bosshi probably wanted to fight. The stone dragon reminded Kai to find the most valuable stone. If he fails, his soul will be swallowed. But it wasn't just about finding the stone. Kai picked up a handful of stones and wondered what value was. Meanwhile, Kuratobai engaged in battle with Dake Bosshi. The master tried to hit the shark with his sword and directed the dragon upwards, but Kuratobai launched a sharp fragment. The dragon flinched. The fragment hit between the wings, almost knocking the master down. Kuo screamed when she saw it, but Dake Bosshi managed to grab the leash. He had barely turned his head when he saw a stone shark with sharp jaws in front of him. He swung his sword and cut open its mouth. At that moment, Furutoba jumped at him with a stick and exclaimed that he was starting to like this fight. Kuo managed to grab Dake Bosshi by the arm with her whip. She asked if he was okay, and he thanked her. Saken suggested a temporary separation. The shark tried to hit their dragon, but it hit a barrier. Dake Bosshi told Kuo to let go of the defense, and she complied. Furutoba jumped off the shark and ordered Dove to catch it. He was certain that Dake Bosshi would not leave him here. And the master did indeed rush to him, asking for a little patience. Meanwhile, Kai was still searching for the gem in the mountains. He suspected it might be a ruby, spinel, or garnet, but it didn't seem right. He grabbed his head, thinking about how a refractometer or a spectroscope would be useful, or at least a polarizer. The stranger with the blindfold said that all the diamonds were here. You just had to find them. But simply calling a diamond valuable would be too banal. People really love diamonds. That's why there's so much conflict around them. And Kai really hated the red diamond. He thought about it, and admitted that he had once really hated him. But the teacher explained that the stone simply exists, and it is not his fault. Moreover, it is thanks to him that Kai survived. Kai thought that perhaps he could learn to accept it. The guide smiled. He agreed. Kai was surprised that his acquaintance still didn't have a name. It seemed strange, as if he couldn't even address him. He suddenly perked up and suggested that Kai come up with a name. He really wanted Kai to name him. It was a responsibility, and the hero asked for some time. The guide decided to look for more diamonds in the meantime. The hero agreed, if only he could calm down a little. Kai looked at the jewels and thought, they simply exist, but people give them meaning. The jewels are separate from the ordinary stones, but they are the same stones. And then Kai remembered the old woman's words. She said that Dake Bosshi was only kind to him because of the red diamond, but the master really fought for him. His path and determination were genuine. And if all that is taken away, it will really be just a red diamond. Kai slammed his hands on the crystals. A dull thud was heard. He didn't realize how foolish it was to think the jewel was to blame for everything. If he had just chosen the first stone he could find now, he would have become just like those who had sought his red diamond. The hero wondered, what is really valuable? Dake Bosshi did not make him a disciple because of the stone. He remembered how Kai had lived in the village, not giving up, living with hope, and a spark burning in his eyes as he vowed to cure his family. Without human desires, even the most precious stones will not shine. They will remain simple pebbles. It all depends on the intention, and that suddenly became clear. Now he knew how to look for value, and he told his new acquaintance about it. I thought about those who determine the price of stones. He picked up the diamond, activated the power, and the stones shone. The stones were not valued by themselves, but by people. Kai thought, Dake Bosshi had never used fire against him. He silently looked at Kuratobai, who was still fighting with the master. Both of them jumped up at the same moment. Kuratobai swung his staff and admitted that he felt very lonely. He attacked, but Dake Bosshi dodged. Then the master drew his sword and tried to strike from below, but Kuratobai parried all subsequent attacks. Kobe fought, but realized he couldn't win as long as he held on to the spear. He wanted to change tactics, but didn't have time. He was hit hard in the head and sent flying into the wall of the building. Dake Bosshi approached him and said that he didn't use fire out of pity. I just didn't think it was necessary. Kuratobai chuckled. Dake Bosshi really has bad manners. The master sheathed his sword, considering his words. Suddenly he turned around and his whole body burst into flames. He decided, if the situation demanded it, he would act accordingly. Two forces collided in Dake Bosshi's body. The petrified poison of antimonite and the blood of the dove. According to Kuratobai, the master was not at all able to use techniques with such a high consumption of driving force. But Dake Bosshi activated the ruby, and it made Kuratobai tense up. He released a stream of burning light. A powerful explosion occurred. Kuratobai dodged, but the master compressed the flame to the limit. It turned into a cannon. Kuratobai touched the ground, and waves of black blades erupted from it. At that very moment, sharp crystals grew from the ground. Dake Bosshi stepped back and threw several stones at them. An explosion rang out. Kuratobai tried to guess where Dake Bosshi would attack from, left or right. The opponent was shocked. The master broke right through the center and swung his sword. Furutoba managed to put out his stick and block the blow. Both blocked attacks at breakneck speed until they bounced back to a safe distance. Dake Bosshi had one important question. He didn't understand why he turned Kai into stone. If it was all just for the sake of the red diamond, why transform the whole body? The master wanted to know the real motives. But Kuratobai replied that he and Dake Bosshi were the same. He licked his lips and said that the boy had a talent that Dake Bosshi had not noticed, and asked him to think about it. What would someone do whose body had turned to stone? I would cut off the gem, that's all. And some will do it simply because they don't want to carry a foreign object inside them. Others to escape those who hunt for their stones. Some to sell it. Kai was different. He had accepted the red diamond, and even the diamond had adapted to him. Kuratobai was sure. He was the same. He said that Kai was a diamond in the rough, but Dake Bosshi didn't understand what he meant. Kuratobai shouted that this boy was not like them, not an artificially created human like the others. Dake Bosshi noticed that the tip of his spear had grown noticeably. The master thought that the enemy hated all gems because of those experiments, and Kuratobai might agree with that. It was true, but he envied their beauty even more. And suddenly he realized something. Everyone can become beautiful stones. Then true happiness will finally come to the world. Kuratobai remembered human quarrels and thought that this was indeed the case. It all begins with discrimination. With these words, he struck Dake Bosshi with the tip of a spear imbued with the spirit of race. People have always considered themselves superior, taking pleasure in despising others, but no one tried to lift those who were below. Those with status pushed others down the stairs, and it looked dirtier than animal instincts. Kuratobai believed that when everyone turned to stone, conflicts would disappear. He jumped and fired dozens of fragments at the master, but he repelled them with a flaming sword. Dake Bosshi hit Kuratobai's hand with flames, after which they met again in close combat. The master thought, perhaps Kuratobai was partly right. Drops of blood dripped onto the ground, and Dake Bosshi broke the stone tip of the spear with his bare hands. And he said that there was no progress in such a world. Yes, without envy and jealousy, the world could really be a better place. He once thought so too, but if everything continues as it is, nothing will change. These children will have no future. Dake Bosshi was about to stop Kuratobai. Kuratobai didn't believe the master was ready for this, but the master released a bright flame and caused a ruby volley of heavenly fire. The enemies suffered significant damage. Dake Bosshi held a spear, while Kuratobai defended himself with a pile of diamonds around him. The master believed that victory was near. He put his blade to Kuratobai's throat and demanded to know how to save the boy. He lowered his head and laughed, and then calmly looked into her eyes. He wanted Golubka to shine even brighter for him. He pressed his cheek against the Dake Bosshi blade and wondered, is this all real? He had never heard anything so sad, but he replied that this was only the beginning. At that moment, a mysterious figure appeared near Kai's petrified body. Its shadow covered the battle arena. She told Cheeto that Rasha had already arrived, but he was surprised. Wasn't it early? They thought it was time to change the guard. Cheeto was happy, but Rasha clearly had no desire to work. Perhaps he was feeling a little tired after the exhausting flight on the dragon. But Shirai said, don't make it up. In her opinion, Cheeto was too soft. They were short of men, so Rasha had to work. He agreed and clarified his task. Rasha was supposed to just work, but he was frankly bored. Shirai didn't understand what he meant, and looked at the masked captain in surprise. But everything became clear when Rasha pulled out his weapon and pushed Cheeto away. The blow went right through Shirai, and Cheeto rushed to the wounded girl with a scream. He didn't understand what Rasha was up to. He didn't respond to the words and used the black agate to cut through space. His ability was teleportation. Cheeto ordered him to stop. Rasha tried to destroy the walls that protected the petrified Kai with his sword, but nothing happened. Shirai stopped him, explaining that Rasha was using the illusions of her appetite. One of the shadowy ones tried to punch Rasha, but the captain instantly disappeared. He thought it was pretty good. Cheeto was cunning as always, but it all seemed like a quagmire to him. It was obvious that these two had known each other for a long time. Rasha could hide behind appetite, but his real body still remained here. One of the allies swung, not realizing that something was wrong with Rasha. He parried the blow and said that he knew its direction. And if he knows, he can transfer everything at once. Shirai couldn't stop him. And at that moment, the structure where Kai was located disappeared. A water fist appeared in front of Rasha, but the captain easily dodged and retreated. Lord Susumi saw this and said, "It doesn't look like anyone is controlling the captain." Then he promised to strangle and drown him right now. Shirai couldn't believe that Susumi would do this. She fell to her knees and apologized to the Lord. But it was too late. The target had already disappeared. Rasha smiled, and what Dake Bosshi saw shocked him. These were the walls of the cube that contained the petrified Kai. The master did not understand how he could have ended up there. Dake Bosshi lost control and Kuratobai kicked him in the stomach. He flew back and hit a building. Kuratobai said it was his punishment. Dake Bosshi felt his ruby react to the cube. It was real. But horror gripped him when he saw that his left hand had completely turned to stone. Kuratobai smiled and ordered him to sit down. The master's hand pulled him down, and he fell. Kobe laughed. He thought it was funny. But the master realized the antimonite poison had activated, and he ordered his hand to move. With his last strength, Dake Bosshi jumped up and rushed at Kuratobai, screaming. But his opponent reached out and ordered him to stop. He threw Dake Bosshi back, sending him crashing into the wall. Kuratobai scoffed, saying he should have taken Dove for a walk. Dake Bosshi took a couple of kani out of his bag and threw them at him. They hit the ground at Kuratobai's feet. The master announced that he was using all the magnetism of his boots. But the enemy only laughed, in vain. Dake Bosshi approached and suddenly felt that he could not breathe. The antimonite poison was taking effect. The master jumped aside and fell, thinking that even the dove's blood wouldn't have stopped it. But at that moment the walls around Kai glowed. The light grew brighter and exploded. Kuratobai smiled and told the master that his student was truly talented. He was delighted that Kai had passed the test. This proved that even Kuratobai could use the power of the red diamond. It all depended on who controlled the power. Kuratobai extended his petrified hand to Kai, calling him Mr. Diamond, saying he would be the one who would be most useful. Dake Bosshi realized that he was going to use the red diamond and begged him to stop. But Kuratobai replied, "Now you will see for yourself how your student will be used." He activated his power and commanded the diamond to approach. A force field formed around the statue of Kai and Kuratobai, causing the ground to tremble. He struck the ground with his stick, and the statue obeyed his will. Dake Bosshi fell to his knees, unable to believe his eyes. Right in front of him, the red diamond invader had awakened a cruel giant statue. He thought with horror, sometimes jewels really. Diamond is a wonderstone, and no one would have thought it could be used to create such a monster in the hands of one in control. At this time, Kai smiled and touched the crystal. He tried to combine the two materials. The two diamonds finally fused together, and Kai said, "Everything is ready." He held out his hand with the crystal and exclaimed joyfully that he had completed the work. After that, he collapsed next to a mountain of processed gems. He noted with pleasure. He polished them all. The guide was delighted and said that Kai had done brilliantly. The hero felt as if he had been polishing these stones for 3 months, although in the real world only 2 days had passed. At that moment, they heard a rumble. The stone dragon emerged from the ground. He believed that the human child already knew the answer. He wanted to know which of the stones was the most valuable, and he waited for Kai's answer. Kai stood up, ready to answer. He said that the most valuable thing was this whole mountain of stones. The dragon didn't understand and asked again. Kai replied that he polished every one of them. They had no special value in themselves. It is people who give meaning to stones. But he wasn't going to do that. Something else was important to him. The value was that he polished each stone with his own hands, and he held out a handful to the dragon. Each stone was valuable because he had put his effort into them. The dragon asked why he chose these stones. Kai remembered how he had once been abandoned on the side of the road, and now he couldn't give up any of them. The dragon thought about his words, and at that moment, the entire mountain of stones behind Kai's back lit up. It turned into light that entered directly into the hero's body. The dragon said that the answer sounded childish, but still he grants Kai the power that corresponds to his answer. From now on, he stands on the border between man and stone. Kai looked at the dragon in surprise. The guide congratulated Kai. He knew he would pass the test. But before he could finish, he felt sick. He fell to the ground. Kai knew immediately that someone had used him. But who exactly? He cautiously reached out to his friend and asked if he was okay. The guide asked Kai to calm down and listen carefully, because right now their world is in danger. The hero didn't understand what was going on, so the stranger said he would show him everything. He asked him to close his eyes and touched his forehead. A giant stone statue appeared before Kai, destroying everything around him. He was stunned and did not understand what he was seeing. I asked what this absurdly large creature was. The stranger replied, "It was the same statue that Kuratobai had summoned with the help of Kai's red diamond." Kai couldn't understand how Kuratobai was able to use his stone. The guide explained that when Kai stepped on the boundary between man and stone, he unconsciously connected them. His body is already on the verge of collapse. Golubka's blood has almost completely been eaten away by Kuratobai's antimonite. Kai didn't understand why he needed all this, but the guide reassured him that they still had hope. If Kuratobai can control the red diamond, then so can Dake Bosshi. The hero was surprised. His teacher also has power. Masters can use various abilities of stones, although the guide himself did not know what power he would be able to summon this time. He apologized that everything happened so suddenly. Kai replied that he believed him and asked for advice on what to do next. The blindfolded stranger pursed his lips and nodded. He asked Kai to make a wish. Wishes for the red diamond. Meanwhile, Kuratobi pointed his stick at Dake Bosshi and declared that victory was already his, and he told the master, "Don't worry for nothing," because he would make Dake Bosshi turn to stone along with his student. The master was only breathing heavily. He was powerless. He sat down directly in front of the petrified statue of Kai, looking at Kuratobi with quiet contempt. Kuratobi only smiled, as if he read in his eyes, "I haven't given up yet." And at that moment, Kai's body ignited, which shocked Kuratobi. Dake Bosshi turned around and saw a red diamond appear in the air. In the guide's hands, various stones shone, and he quietly asked Kai to make a wish. Jewels became such thanks to human desires. Kai only had to wish. At that moment, he and the teacher simultaneously reached for the bright flash. In the next vision, they were walking side by side, holding hands. Kuratobi decided he had had enough, and tried to stop their futile stubbornness. He told Kai, "If your ability is reflection, then the next level is inversion, and you can reverse the force that petrified you." Dake Bosshi struck, who covered the student with himself, and the connection of their desires created a red mirror.